The ceiling exploded. White plaster dust rained down like snow as the gunshot echoed through Mercy Point General's emergency room. Patients screamed, monitors flatlined. And behind the nurse's station, 29-year-old Emma Hartwell hit the floor, her body moving with a precision that didn't match the terrified girl everyone thought they knew. 4 armed men, 47 civilians, 1 overlooked nurse who'd spent 3 years being invisible. They'd called her soft, incompetent, a liability waiting to happen. They had no idea what she'd buried beneath those oversized scrubs. If you want to see how this story ends, how the nurse nobody took seriously becomes the only one who matters, stay with me until the final word. Drop a like, leave a comment with your city, so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. 3 days before the ceiling came down, Emma Hartwell stood in the supply closet counting IV bags for the 4th time that week. Her hands shook slightly as she marked the inventory sheet, not from nerves, but from exhaustion. The overnight shift had bled into morning, and her supervisor hadn't bothered to arrange coverage. "Hartwell!" The voice cut through the cramped space like a blade. Emma turned to find Diane Porter filling the doorway, arms crossed, expression carved from irritation. "Those discharge papers from last night are still sitting on my desk. Incomplete." "I finished them before I left," Emma said quietly. "All 6. "Then you did them wrong." Diane tossed a manila folder at Emma's feet, paper scattered across the tile. "Fix them. And when you're done, Linda needs the medication cart restocked. Apparently that's too complicated for some people." Emma bent to gather the papers, her face carefully neutral. She'd learned that expression in places far uglier than hospital supply closets. Learned that showing nothing was sometimes the only defense you had. Diane left without another word. Emma straightened the papers and noticed immediately what Diane had missed. The discharge summaries were perfect. Every box checked, every signature in place. Someone had pulled them from the completed stack just to manufacture a problem. She filed them away without comment and moved toward the medication room. Mercy Point General sat in the heart of Ridgeway, a coastal city where rust met renovation and nobody quite agreed on which direction the town was heading. The hospital served everyone, dock workers with crushed hands, college students with alcohol poisoning, elderly patients whose bodies were giving out in slow motion. The ER saw everything, and Emma had learned to keep her head down through all of it. "Coffee?" Emma looked up to find Jack Ramirez rolling his wheelchair alongside her, a thermos balanced on his lap. The 61-year-old veteran worked in patient transport, moving people between floors with the kind of efficiency that came from years of military logistics. "I'm okay," Emma said. "You look like you slept in a closet." "Close. Broke room couch." Jack studied her for a moment longer than necessary. Emma had noticed that before, the way his eyes tracked her movements, like he was cataloging something he couldn't quite name. "Diane giving you trouble again?" "Just keeping me busy." "That woman wouldn't know good work if it filed her taxes." Jack unscrewed the thermos and poured coffee into the lid. "Here, doctor's orders." Emma accepted it with a small smile. Jack was one of the few people at Mercy Point who treated her like an actual human being rather than a problem to be managed. "You ever think about transferring?" Jack asked. "Different department, maybe? You've been here 3 years. That's long enough to know this place chews people up. I like the ER. The ER doesn't like you back." Emma didn't argue. Jack was right. From the moment she'd started at Mercy Point, she'd been marked as the weak link. Too young. Too quiet. Too hesitant during trauma calls. The other nurses had made their assessments quickly, and nothing Emma did seemed to change their minds. Diane Porter led the charge. A 19-year veteran of emergency medicine, Diane ran the nursing staff with the subtlety of a drill sergeant and the empathy of a parking meter. She'd decided within Emma's first month that the new hire was dead weight, and she'd spent 3 years proving herself right through strategic incompetence, assigning Emma the worst shifts, the most tedious paperwork, the patients nobody else wanted. Emma had learned to absorb it, learned to be small and forgettable. It was safer that way. "Hartwell, we need you in trauma too." Emma handed the coffee back to Jack and headed toward the trauma bay, where a motorcycle accident victim was being wheeled in by paramedics. The man's leg was shattered, bone visible through torn denim, blood soaking through the temporary splint. 28-year-old male, hit a guardrail going 60, the lead paramedic rattled off. Compound tib-fib fracture, possible internal bleeding, BP dropping. Dr. Richard Vance, the attending physician, barely glanced at Emma as she entered. Get a line started, 2 large-bore IVs, and someone page orthopedics before this guy bleeds out. Emma moved quickly, her hands steady despite the chaos. She found the vein on the first try, secured the IV, and had the second line placed before Dr. Vance finished his initial assessment. Fluids wide open, she said quietly. Vance grunted acknowledgement and turned to the physician assistant. Let's get him to imaging, and somebody find out if ortho is even in the building today. Emma stepped back as the team moved the patient toward CT. She stripped off her gloves and was turning toward the sink when Diane appeared at her shoulder. You placed those IVs without asking Dr. Vance first. Emma blinked. He ordered them. He ordered them generally. You should have confirmed placement sites. They're standard. Don't argue with me, Hartwell. I'm documenting this as a procedural violation. Maybe next time you'll remember to communicate before you act. Diane walked away, leaving Emma standing beside the now empty trauma bay. Across the room, another nurse, Kelly something, Emma couldn't remember her last name, smirked and whispered something to her colleague. Emma washed her hands and returned to the medication cart. The rest of the shift blurred into a familiar rhythm of minor complaints and controlled chaos. A kid with a broken wrist, an elderly woman with pneumonia, a construction worker who'd put a nail through his hand and kept insisting he was fine. Emma moved between patients, efficient and invisible, exactly the way she'd trained herself to be. At 3 p.m., hospital director Marcus Blackwell appeared in the ER, his expensive suit looking absurdly out of place among the blood-stained gurneys and flickering fluorescent lights. He moved through the department like a man inspecting property, nodding at senior staff and ignoring everyone else. Emma was restocking the crash cart when he paused nearby, speaking to Diane in a voice that didn't bother with discretion. We're over budget again, Blackwell said. I need you to cut hours. Start with the low performers. Diane's eyes flicked toward Emma. Already have a list. Good. And I want this ER running leaner. We're not a charity. If people can't pull their weight, they need to find somewhere else to be mediocre. Emma kept her hands moving, organizing medications with mechanical precision. She felt Blackwell's gaze sweep past her like she was part of the furniture. That security upgrade you requested, Blackwell continued. Denied. The checkpoint works fine. We're not throwing money at problems that don't exist. The scanners are 10 years old, Diane said. They miss half the weapons that come through. Then tell your staff to pay attention. Security theater isn't in the budget. Emma's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. She'd noticed the checkpoint failures, too. The way people walked through with bags that should have triggered alarms. The broken cameras in the parking garage. The side entrance that didn't lock properly. She'd mentioned it once to Diane, who'd dismissed her immediately. Stick to Band-Aids, Hartwell. Let the adults handle security. Now Blackwell was actively refusing to fix it. Emma finished with the crash cart and moved toward the staff break room, where Jack was eating a sandwich and working on a crossword puzzle. You look thrilled, Jack said. Long day. It's only 3 o'clock. Emma poured herself water and sat down, letting the silence stretch. Jack had a gift for knowing when to talk and when to let things breathe. They're cutting hours, Emma said finally. Jack set down his pen. Yours? Probably. That's garbage. You work twice as hard as half the people here. Diane doesn't see it that way. Diane couldn't see daylight with a spotlight. Jack leaned back, studying her. You ever going to tell me why you put up with this? Emma didn't answer. The real answer was complicated, buried under layers of decisions she'd made years ago, in places Jack had never been. She'd chosen this life deliberately, chosen to be unremarkable, chosen to let people underestimate her. It had seemed like the right move at the time. I need the job, Emma said, which was true enough. You could get a job anywhere. Good nurses aren't exactly common. Maybe I'm not that good, Jack snorted. Yeah, sure. That's why you place 2 IVs in a trauma patient faster than I've seen residents do it. Pure incompetence. Emma stood uncomfortable with the observation. I should get back. Emma. She paused at the door. Whatever you're hiding, Jack said quietly, it's going to come out eventually. Things like that always do. Emma left without responding. The rest of the afternoon crawled past in a haze of routine complaints and tedious documentation. By 6 p.m., Emma's shift should have ended, but Diane found her anyway. I need you to stay late. Kelly called out sick. I've been here for 14 hours. Then what's 2 more? Diane didn't wait for an answer. There's a pile of charts that need review. Get them done before you leave. Emma nodded and returned to the nurse's station, where a stack of patient files waited like a punishment. She worked through them methodically, checking vitals, flagging inconsistencies, making sure nothing fell through the cracks. At 8 p.m., the ER doors burst open. An elderly man stumbled inside, his face bleeding from a gash above his eye. Behind him, a younger woman was screaming into her phone. He just collapsed. I don't know. Please, someone help. Emma moved immediately, guiding the man toward a chair while assessing his injuries. The cut was superficial, but his breathing was labored, his skin clammy. Sir, can you tell me your name? Walter. Walter Briggs. His voice came out thin and strained. My chest. Something's wrong. Emma flagged down Dr. Vance, who took one look at Walter's EKG and started barking orders. Possible MI. Get him on a monitor, aspirin, nitro, and someone call cardiology. The next 20 minutes blurred into controlled emergency. Emma stayed with Walter, monitoring his vitals, adjusting medications, keeping him calm while the cardiology team prepared for transport. When they finally wheeled him toward the cath lab, his daughter grabbed Emma's hand. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Emma squeezed back and said nothing. By the time Walter was stable and the paperwork finished, it was nearly 10 p.m. Emma's legs ached. Her head pounded. She grabbed her bag from the locker room and headed for the exit, desperate for sleep. She was halfway across the parking lot when she heard footsteps behind her. Emma turned to find Marcus Blackwell standing near his Mercedes, phone pressed to his ear. He wasn't looking at her, wasn't looking at anything, really, but his voice carried across the empty lot. I don't care what the inspection says. We're not fixing it. Just bury the report. Emma froze. The checkpoint? Blackwell continued. It's fine. If something happens, we'll deal with it then. Right now I need those funds redirected to the new wing. That's where the donors are looking. He ended the call and climbed into his car without noticing Emma standing 30 feet away. She watched his taillights disappear into traffic, her mind cataloging what she'd just heard. Buried inspection reports. Diverted funds. Security systems deliberately left broken. Emma thought about saying something, filing a complaint, going to the board. Then she thought about Diane's smirk and Blackwell's dismissive glances and 3 years of being treated like a liability. She walked to her car and drove home. 2 days later, Emma was back on shift when the first cracks appeared. It started small. A man in maintenance coveralls walking through the ER checkpoint without triggering the metal detector. Emma noticed because she always noticed, but nobody else seemed to care. The security guard waved him through without a second glance. Then another maintenance worker appeared. And another. 4 men total, moving through the department with the kind of casual confidence that came from knowing nobody was paying attention. Emma watched them spread out across the ER, her instincts whispering warnings she'd learned to trust a long time ago. Something was wrong. The way they moved. Too coordinated, too deliberate. She was reaching for her phone when one of the men pulled a gun from his toolbox. The shot punched through the ceiling, plaster dust exploded downward. Patients screamed, monitors shrieked, and Emma dropped behind the nurse's station, her body moving on autopilot while her mind shifted into a gear she hadn't used in years. 4 hostiles, semi-automatic weapons, 47 civilians in immediate danger. Nobody moves, the lead gunman's voice cut through the chaos. Everybody on the ground, now! People dropped, some crying, some frozen in shock. Emma stayed low, her breathing controlled, her heart rate steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She could see 3 of the gunmen from her position, one covering the main entrance, one near the trauma bays, one moving toward the medication room. The 4th was out of sight. Diane Porter was on the floor near the central desk, her face pale with terror. Doctor. Vance had his hands raised, mouth moving in some useless attempt at negotiation. Kelly, the nurse who'd called out sick, was sobbing into the tile. We want the pharmacy access codes, the lead gunman announced, and the controlled substances. You've got 2 minutes before we start making examples. Nobody moved. Emma's mind was already calculating angles, exit routes, weapon positions, civilian groupings. Her right hand slipped into her scrub pocket and found the cold metal token she'd carried for 7 years. The challenge coin from a unit that officially didn't exist, stamped with a motto she'd tried to forget. Who dares wins. The fourth gunman appeared suddenly, dragging Walter Briggs, the elderly man Emma had saved 2 nights ago, by his hospital gown. Walter's face was bruised, blood streaming from his nose. "This one tried to be a hero," the gunman snarled. He shoved Walter to the floor and raised his boot. Emma's body moved before her brain caught up. She was halfway across the ER floor when Jack Ramirez's voice cut through her momentum like a whip. "Don't!" Emma stopped, looked down. Jack was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before, recognition mixed with something closer to awe. "Not yet," he whispered. "Wait for the opening." And Emma realized, with cold certainty, that Jack knew, had always known. The gunman's boot came down on Walter's ribs with a crack that echoed through the silent ER. Walter's scream cut off into a wet gasp as the boot connected again. Emma's muscles locked, every fiber screaming at her to move, but Jack's hand had found her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong for a man in a wheelchair. "Count to 10, Jack breathed. "They'll separate. They always separate." Emma forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The kind of breathing that slowed heart rates and sharpened focus. She hadn't used it in 7 years, but her body remembered. The lead gunman kicked Walter once more for good measure, then stepped away, moving toward Diane at the nurse's station. "You, the one who looks like she's in charge. Get me those codes, now." Diane's hands shook so badly she could barely type on the computer. I don't have direct access. It requires 2 administrators." "Then find someone who does." "The pharmacy director went home an hour ago." The gunman pressed the barrel against Diane's temple. "Sounds like a problem you need to solve quickly." Emma's eyes tracked the other 3 men. The one near the entrance kept glancing at his phone, waiting for something, maybe a signal. The one by the trauma bays was younger, jittery, his weapon sweeping back and forth with too much energy. The fourth had moved into the medication room and was pulling drawers open at random, looking for anything valuable. Amateur hour. These weren't professionals. Professionals would have secured the pharmacy first, isolated communications, established a perimeter. These idiots had walked in with guns and a half-formed plan, banking on fear to carry them through. It would work too, against normal people. Emma felt the challenge coin pressing against her palm, metal warm from body heat. 7 years since she'd carried a rifle. 7 years since she'd worn the uniform. 7 years since her team leader had bled out in her arms during an extraction gone sideways, whispering her name until the words dissolved into nothing. 7 years of convincing herself she was done with violence. "I can override the system," Dr. Vance said suddenly, his voice cracking. "I have administrative access. Just please don't hurt anyone else." The lead gunman swung his weapon toward Vance. "Then move. Now!" Vance stood slowly, hands raised, and started toward the pharmacy terminal. Emma watched him shuffle past, saw the terror etched into every line of his face, and felt something cold settle in her chest. She was going to have to do this. Not because she wanted to, not because it was smart or safe or anything resembling a good idea, but because 47 people were counting on someone to act, and everyone else in this room was paralyzed by fear or incompetence or both. The jittery gunman near the trauma bays shifted position, moving closer to a cluster of patients huddled against the wall. A pregnant woman. 2 kids who'd been waiting for their father to finish getting stitches. An elderly couple holding hands like the world was ending. Maybe it was. Emma's hand slipped from her pocket to the edge of the nurse's station, fingers finding the metal bracket of a supply drawer. The challenge coin stayed pressed against her other palm, a reminder of who she used to be, who she still was, apparently. "Jack," she whispered, "when I move, you get Walter out. Rear corridor past radiology. Don't stop." Jack's eyes widened. "Emma, you know what I am. You've known for a while. Knowing and watching are different things. Then don't watch. Emma shifted her weight, muscles coiling. The lead gunman was focused on Vance at the terminal. The entrance guard was still checking his phone. The medication room raider was elbow deep in controlled substances. That left Jittery Kid as the immediate threat and the immediate opportunity. She was about to move when the ER doors exploded inward. Not violently, not dramatically, just the normal pneumatic hiss of automatic doors opening for a new arrival. Everyone froze. A woman stumbled through, clutching her stomach, face twisted in pain. "Please, I need help. My baby." The entrance guard swung his weapon toward her. "Get on the floor. I'm in labor. Please." "I said get down." The woman collapsed, whether from fear or contractions Emma couldn't tell, but the distraction was enough. The lead gunman turned his attention toward the entrance. The Jittery Kid took 3 steps away from the trauma bay patients. Emma moved. She crossed the distance in 4 strides, body low, silent. The Jittery Kid didn't see her coming until her hand locked around his wrist, twisting the weapon upward with a pressure point technique that turned his grip to jelly. The gun clattered to the floor as Emma drove her elbow into his solar plexus, folding him like wet cardboard. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Jack was already moving, wheelchair spinning toward Walter, strong arms hauling the injured veteran into his lap. They disappeared through the corridor before anyone else processed what was happening. The lead gunman spun toward Emma, weapon rising, but she was already dropping behind a gurney, pulling the Jittery Kid's confiscated gun with her. She didn't aim it at anyone, didn't even check if it was loaded, just held it low and waited. "Who the hell are you?" the lead gunman shouted. Emma didn't answer. Her mind was racing through tactical options. 3 hostiles remaining. Unknown ammunition counts. Civilians scattered across the ER with no cover. The pregnant woman at the entrance was still on the floor, possibly in actual labor, or possibly the worst timed arrival in medical history. Either way, the situation had just gone from hostage crisis to active combat zone, and Emma was the idiot who'd started it. "Security's already on their way," Diane said from somewhere behind the nurse's station, her voice shaking but audible. "Police too. You need to leave before—" The lead gunman fired around into the ceiling. More plaster dust. More screaming. "Nobody's going anywhere until I get what I came for." Emma peeked around the gurney. The entrance guard had moved deeper into the ER, trying to flank her position. The medication room raider was emerging with a duffel bag half full of pill bottles. 3 men, 3 different positions, and Emma was pinned behind a gurney with a weapon she wasn't sure worked and civilians in every direction. Professional combat medic training included weapons familiarization, close quarters tactics, and emergency extractions under fire. But that training assumed you had a team. Backup. Air support if things went sideways. Emma had a wheelchair-bound veteran, a terrified nursing staff, and her own extremely poor decision-making skills. She checked the gun. Magazine was in, chamber loaded, safety off. The Jittery Kid had been ready to use it. Emma wasn't. She set it down and pulled a trauma shear from the gurney's supply rack instead. 6 inches of stainless steel designed for cutting through clothing in emergencies. Not a weapon. Not really. But it was something. "Listen to me very carefully," the lead gunman was saying, his voice carrying across the ER. "Whoever just played hero, show yourself, right now, or I start shooting patients until you do." Emma stayed low, counted to 5, breathed. The entrance guard was 10 feet away, moving carefully, weapon sweeping. He hadn't spotted her yet. "I'm not joking." The lead gunman grabbed Kelly, the nurse who'd been sobbing earlier, and pressed his gun against her spine. "You've got 5 seconds! 5! Kelly screamed. 4! Emma's hands tightened on the trauma shear. 3! She could disarm the entrance guard. Probably. Maybe. The angle was bad and her timing would have to be perfect, but it was doable. And then what? The lead gunman would execute Kelly before Emma could cross the room. 2! Diane's voice cracked through the tension. "Stop, please! She's just a nurse! She doesn't know anything!" 1. Emma stood up. Not slowly, not dramatically. Just rose from behind the gurney with her hands visible and empty, the trauma shear tucked against her forearm where nobody could see it. "I'm here," she said. "Let her go." The lead gunman shoved Kelly aside and fixed his attention on Emma. Up close, She could see he was older than she'd thought, late 40s maybe, with a face that had seen its share of bad choices. His eyes were flat, cold. This wasn't his first robbery. "Who are you supposed to be?" he asked. "Nobody. I work here." "Nobody who works here moves like that." Emma said nothing. The entrance guard had closed the distance now, weapon trained on Emma's center mass. The medication room raider was watching from the pharmacy entrance, duffel bag in one hand, gun in the other. 3 on 1. No cover. No backup. Emma had been in worse situations. Not many, but some. "Here's what's going to happen," the lead gunman said. "You're going to open that pharmacy for us. Full access. Everything we want. And if you try anything cute, I'm going to shoot everyone in this room, starting with the pregnant lady and working my way through until you cooperate. Understand?" Emma nodded slowly. "Good. Move!" She walked toward the pharmacy terminal where Dr. Vance stood frozen, his hand still hovering over the keyboard. The lead gunman stayed 3 steps behind her, weapon never wavering. Emma's mind was calculating distances, angles, timing. She reached the terminal and glanced at the screen. Vance had gotten halfway through the override sequence before freezing up. Just needed an administrator code and biometric confirmation. "Do it," the lead gunman ordered. Emma typed her employee ID. The system beeped. Access denied. "I don't have authorization," Emma said. "I'm just a floor nurse." "Then get someone who does." The pharmacy director went home. Dr. Vance has partial access, but it requires... The lead gunman pressed the gun against Emma's shoulder blade. "I don't care what it requires. Make it work or people start dying." Emma looked at Vance. The physician was sweating through his shirt, eyes wide with panic. "Richard," Emma said quietly, "I need you to finish the override sequence." Vance shook his head. "I can't. If I do this, my license... Your license won't matter if he shoots everyone in this ER." "Do what she says," the lead gunman added helpfully. Vance's hands trembled over the keyboard. He typed slowly, making mistakes, backtracking. The system kept beeping rejections. The entrance guard shifted impatiently. The medication room raider was checking his phone now, same as the entrance guard had been doing earlier, waiting for something. Emma filed that detail away. "How much longer?" the lead gunman demanded. "I'm trying," Vance stammered. "The system keeps..." A phone rang. Not a cell phone. The emergency line at the nurse's station. A hard-wired system that bypassed normal channels. Everyone turned toward the sound. The lead gunman gestured to Diane. "Answer it. And if you say anything stupid, people die." Diane picked up the receiver with shaking hands. "Hello?" A pause. "Yes, he's here." She held out the phone. "They want to talk to you." The lead gunman took it, keeping his weapon trained on Emma. "Who is this?" Another pause. Emma watched his expression shift from irritation to surprise to something closer to concern. "How did you—" He stopped, listened. "No, we had a deal. You said the checkpoint would be down." More listening. "I don't care about your problems. We did our part. You do yours." He slammed the phone down and turned to his crew. "We're leaving, now." The entrance guard blinked. "What about the pharmacy?" "Forget it. Grab what we have and move." "But you said..." "I said move." Something had changed. Emma could see it in the lead gunman's body language, the way his weight shifted toward the exit, the tension in his shoulders. Whoever had been on that phone had spooked him badly. The medication room raider was already heading for the door, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The entrance guard hesitated, then followed. The lead gunman backed toward the exit, weapons still raised. "Anyone follows us, everyone dies. Stay down for 10 minutes. I've got people watching the exits." Then they were gone. The ER stayed frozen for 5 long seconds. Diane broke first, sobbing into her hands. Kelly collapsed into a chair. Dr. Vance leaned against the pharmacy terminal like his legs had stopped working. Emma crossed to the pregnant woman still lying near the entrance. Up close, she could see the woman's water had broken. Actual labor, not a coincidence. Emma helped her onto a gurney and started an IV while simultaneously calling for an OB consult. "You're going to be okay," Emma said. "We'll get you upstairs." The woman grabbed Emma's wrist. Thank you for earlier. Don't thank me yet. You're about to push a human being out of your body. That's the hard part. A laugh that sounded half like a sob. What's your name? Emma. I'm Sarah. Emma secured the IV and flagged down another nurse who'd emerged from wherever she'd been hiding. Get her to labor and delivery, full monitoring. She's been through hell. Then she went to find Jack. He was in the corridor past radiology, exactly where Emma had told him to go. Walter Briggs sat in a plastic chair, holding his ribs and breathing carefully. Jack's wheelchair was positioned like a barricade between Walter and the rest of the world. Everyone okay? Emma asked. Alive, Jack said, which is more than I expected 5 minutes ago. Walter looked up at Emma with an expression she couldn't quite read. You moved like a soldier. Emma said nothing. I was Army, Walter continued. 80s mostly. Did a tour in Central America nobody talks about. I know combat training when I see it. Jack was watching Emma carefully. You two going to compare war stories, or should we figure out what happens next? What happened next was chaos of a different variety. Police arrived 8 minutes later. 6 officers in tactical gear, moving through the ER like they expected gunfire. They cleared rooms, checked corners, and generally treated the crime scene with the seriousness it deserved. Emma gave her statement to a detective named Morrison, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and zero patience for incomplete answers. You disarmed one of the suspects, Morrison said. He wasn't paying attention. Uh-huh. And you've had training in weapon retention? Emma hesitated. Some? Military? Medical. Morrison made a note that Emma suspected said something less charitable than the words implied. We'll need you available for follow-up questions. I work here. I'm not going anywhere. The detective moved on to interview other witnesses, and Emma found herself standing in the middle of the ER watching crime scene techs photograph bullet holes and bag evidence. The whole department had transformed into something unrecognizable. Yellow tape, forensic markers, police radios crackling with code numbers Emma hadn't heard in years. She was trying to process it all when Marcus Blackwell arrived. The hospital director looked like he'd been dragged out of a dinner party. Expensive suit, rumpled, tie loose, expression caught somewhere between fury and barely controlled panic. He made a beeline for Detective Morrison, speaking in urgent whispers Emma couldn't hear. Then he turned toward the nursing staff. I need everyone's full cooperation with the investigation, Blackwell announced. This is a terrible tragedy, but I want to assure you all that Mercy Point General maintains the highest security standards. The checkpoint failed, Emma said. Every head turned toward her. Blackwell's expression hardened. Excuse me? The metal detectors. They didn't work. 4 armed men walked straight through with weapons and nobody noticed. That's not... We have protocols. Your protocols put 47 people in danger tonight. The ER went very quiet. Blackwell took a step toward Emma, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Nurse Hartwell, I suggest you focus on doing your job and let the professionals handle security assessments. I tried that. You ignored me. You mentioned a malfunctioning door lock in an email 6 months ago. That's hardly the same as... I mentioned the checkpoint 3 times. The cameras in the parking garage. The broken badge reader on the south entrance. Every time I was told to mind my own business. Diane had appeared at Blackwell's shoulder, her face still pale but her eyes sharp. Emma, this isn't the time. When is the time? Emma looked directly at Blackwell. People almost died tonight because you cut corners to save money. When exactly were we supposed to talk about that? Blackwell's face flushed red. My office. Tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. We're going to have a very serious conversation about insubordination. He stormed off, leaving Emma standing in the middle of the ER with every eye on her. Diane moved closer, her voice tight. What are you trying to accomplish? The truth. The truth is that you're a junior nurse with no authority making serious accusations against the hospital director. That's career suicide. At least it's honest. Diane's expression shifted to something almost pitying. You really don't understand how this works, do you? Blackwell will bury you, and everyone here will let him, because nobody wants to be next. She walked away before Emma could respond. The rest of the night blurred into statements and paperwork and the slow process of returning the ER to something resembling functionality. Police finally cleared the scene around midnight. The blood got mopped up. The bullet holes got photographed and cataloged. Sarah delivered a healthy baby girl upstairs, while Emma was giving her fourth statement to a different detective who asked all the same questions in slightly different words. By 2 a.m., Emma was sitting in the break room with Jack, both of them nursing cold coffee and exhaustion. "You know he's going to fire you," Jack said. "Probably." "You could have kept quiet. Let it go." "Could have." Jack studied her over the rim of his cup. "Special Operations Medical Group. That's what Walter said. He looked you up while we were waiting in the corridor. Recognized your face from a ceremony photo 7 years ago. Arlington National Cemetery. You were receiving some kind of commendation." Emma's hands tightened around her coffee. "The group doesn't officially exist," Jack continued, "but Walter served with guys who knew guys. He says they called you the Ghost. Said you pulled 17 wounded operators out of a firefight in Yemen when the extraction bird went down. Said you killed 4 enemy combatants with a field knife because you were out of ammunition." "Walter talks too much." "Is it true?" Emma set down her coffee. "What difference does it make?" "Makes a difference to the people whose lives you saved tonight. Makes a difference to me." Jack leaned forward. "You've been pretending to be helpless for 3 years. Why?" "Because helpless people don't get sent back into combat zones." "You really think hiding would work forever?" "Worked until tonight." Jack shook his head slowly. "Emma, you never stopped being a soldier. You just convinced yourself the uniform was the only thing that mattered." Before Emma could respond, Detective Morrison reappeared in the doorway. "Hartwell, got a minute?" Emma followed the detective into an empty examination room. Morrison closed the door and pulled out her notebook. "We've been reviewing security footage from the checkpoint," Morrison said. "The system was deliberately tampered with. Someone disabled the sensors 2 hours before the robbery." Emma wasn't surprised. "Inside job?" "Looking that way. But here's where it gets interesting. The phone call your gunman received? We traced it to a burner phone registered to a shell company. That company has financial ties to 3 different hospital administrators." "Including Blackwell?" Morrison's expression stayed neutral. "Can't confirm that yet, but between you and me, this wasn't just a robbery. Someone wanted access to that pharmacy, and they had help from inside the hospital." "What do you need from me?" "Keep your head down. If someone inside Mercy Point is involved, they're going to be very interested in silencing anyone who asks too many questions." "You're telling me to stay quiet." "I'm telling you to stay alive." Morrison handed Emma a business card. "My direct line. You see anything unusual? You call me. Don't try to handle it yourself." The detective left. Emma stood in the empty exam room, turning the business card over in her fingers. Outside, the ER was slowly returning to its normal rhythm. Drunk college kids, overdoses, the human wreckage that arrived every night regardless of armed robberies or corruption scandals. She should go home, sleep, forget this whole night ever happened. Instead, Emma walked to the administrative wing. It was empty at 2:30 a.m., just fluorescent lights humming over vacant desks and locked office doors. Emma moved past the reception area toward Marcus Blackwell's corner office, her footsteps silent on industrial carpet. The door was locked, but the keycard reader beside it was the same model as the one on the medication room. Emma pulled her employee badge and held it against the sensor while simultaneously pressing the emergency override sequence she'd memorized during orientation 3 years ago. The lock clicked open. Emma slipped inside and closed the door behind her. Blackwell's office was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive furniture, framed certificates, a view of the parking lot that probably looked better in daylight. His desk was clear except for a laptop and a small framed photo of Blackwell shaking hands with the mayor. Emma sat down at the computer and pressed the power button. The login screen appeared. Password protected, obviously. She tried Blackwell's birthday. It was on the employee directory. No luck. Tried Mercy Point, then Hospital 2024, then combinations of his name. Nothing worked. Emma was about to give up when she noticed the photo frame. She picked it up, turned it over. Taped to the back was a sticky note with a string of characters. MPG-admin-7829. Seriously? She typed it in. The computer unlocked. Emma spent the next 20 minutes digging through Blackwell's files. Most of it was boring administrator stuff, budget reports, staffing memos, vendor contracts. But buried in a subfolder marked Capital Projects was a series of emails between Blackwell and someone named Vincent Cross. The emails were careful, vague, but the pattern was clear. Cross was a contractor who'd been awarded multiple hospital renovation projects over the past 2 years. Security upgrades, equipment purchases, facility maintenance. According to the invoices, Mercy Point had paid Cross's company over $4 million. But the work was never completed. The security cameras stayed broken. The checkpoint remained outdated. The parking garage lighting never improved. $4 million had disappeared into a black hole. And Blackwell's personal bank statements, carelessly saved in the same folder, showed regular deposits from an offshore account matching the exact dates of Cross's payments. Emma was photographing the screen with her phone when the office door opened behind her. She spun around, heart hammering. Marcus Blackwell stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. "I warned you," he said quietly. "I told you to keep your head down." Emma's hand moved toward the trauma shear still tucked in her pocket, but Blackwell was faster. He pulled something from his jacket, not a gun, but a phone, and held it up so Emma could see the screen. It showed live security footage of Jack Ramirez in the parking garage, being shoved into the back of a black van by 2 men in maintenance uniforms. "Here's what's going to happen," Blackwell said. "You're going to delete those photos. Then you're going to resign quietly and disappear. If you cooperate, your friend lives. If you don't..." The phone screen went dark. Emma's finger was already moving across her phone screen before Blackwell finished his threat. 3 quick taps, send photos to Morrison's direct line. Another tap, backup to cloud storage. The whole process took 2 seconds. Blackwell's eyes tracked the movement. His jaw tightened. "Stupid mistake," he said. "Maybe. But now we both have problems." Emma stood slowly, keeping the desk between them. Her right hand stayed loose at her side, ready to move. The trauma shear was still in her pocket, but pulling a weapon would escalate this into something she couldn't walk back from. Blackwell gestured with his phone. "I just sent a text, 1 word. Your friend has maybe 90 seconds before they dump him in the harbor." "You're bluffing. Try me." Emma's mind raced through options. If she called the police, Jack died before they arrived. If she cooperated, Blackwell had no reason to keep either of them alive. Witnesses to a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme didn't get retirement packages. The only leverage she had was the evidence already sent to Morrison, and that wouldn't save Jack in the next 2 minutes. "What do you want?" Emma asked. "I already told you. Resign, disappear, and pray I'm feeling generous when this is over." "You killed those gunmen. The robbery wasn't about drugs. It was about covering your tracks." Blackwell smiled without warmth. "The robbery was about creating chaos. Hospital under siege, emergency protocols failing, tragic evidence of security failures that justified my upcoming resignation. Very sad. Very lucrative severance package. And conveniently, all the people asking uncomfortable questions get caught in the crossfire. Except it didn't work. Because you had to play hero." Blackwell checked his watch. 60 seconds. Make your choice." Emma pulled out her phone again, opened her contacts, found the number she'd programmed 3 years ago and never used, the emergency line that connected directly to her old unit's operations center, the number she'd sworn she'd never dial again. She pressed call. It rang once. "Authorization code," a flat voice answered. "Sierra 7 Tango 49 Whiskey," Emma said. The words felt strange in her mouth after so long. "Priority Omega. Civilian asset in immediate danger. Ridgeway Harbor District, black van, 2 hostiles, 1 friendly. Request immediate intercept." A pause. Keys clicking. "Ghost? That you?" Emma's throat tightened. "Yeah." "Stand by." Blackwell was staring at her now with an expression caught between confusion and dawning concern. "What did you just do?" "Called in a favor?" "From who?" Emma didn't answer. On the other end of the line, the operator was speaking rapidly to someone else. Coordinates, asset descriptions, tactical priorities. Then back to Emma. "Nearest team is 8 minutes out. Can you confirm the asset's location?" Parking garage, north side. They're mobile. Copy. Tracking now via satellite. We have visual on the van. 2 subjects visible. Intercept authorized. Ghost. Your clearance was revoked in 2019. Using this channel without active status is a federal violation. Add it to my file. Command wants to talk to you after this. They can get in line. Emma ended the call and looked at Blackwell. You've got maybe 6 minutes before a special operations team turns your hired muscle into a bad memory. Want to rethink your leverage? Blackwell's face went pale. You're lying. Call your people. See if they answer. He did. Pressed a number on his phone and waited. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried another number. Same result. Emma moved around the desk, closing distance. Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to sit down, stay quiet, and wait for the police to arrive. Because if you run, I will find you, and I won't be nearly as patient as Detective Morrison. You can't threaten me. You're nobody. Emma's hand shot out and grabbed Blackwell's wrist, applying pressure to a nerve cluster that dropped him to his knees with a gasp. She held him there for 3 seconds, just long enough to make her point, then released him. I'm the nobody who just ended your career, Emma said. Sit down. Blackwell collapsed into his office chair, cradling his wrist. For the first time since Emma had met him, the hospital director looked genuinely afraid. Emma's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Asset secure. Hostiles neutralized. Local PD en route to your location. You owe us an explanation. She showed the message to Blackwell. Jack's safe. Your people aren't. And in about 30 seconds, this building is going to be full of cops who are very interested in your financial records. Right on cue, sirens wailed in the distance. Blackwell's hands shook. You don't understand. This is bigger than me. Vincent Cross has connections, politicians, judges, people who make problems disappear. Then he can try to make me disappear. I've survived worse. The sirens grew louder. Emma heard car doors slamming in the parking lot, voices shouting orders. She walked to Blackwell's desk and picked up his laptop, tucking it under her arm. Don't move, she said. And don't make me come back here. Emma left the office and headed toward the main entrance where Detective Morrison was striding through the doors with 4 uniformed officers behind her. The detective spotted Emma and the laptop and put the pieces together instantly. Please tell me you have a warrant for that, Morrison said. I have evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Close enough? Morrison held out her hand. Emma passed over the laptop. There's a shell company called Apex Renovations, Emma said. $4 million in hospital funds. None of the contracted work was completed. Blackwell's personal accounts show matching deposits. And about 5 minutes ago, he tried to have Jack Ramirez killed to cover it up. You got proof? On that laptop. Also sent you photos from my phone. Morrison gestured to her officers. Blackwell's in his office. Bring him in. Read him his rights and don't let him touch anything. 2 officers headed down the corridor. Morrison turned back to Emma. You broke into his office. The door was open. You hacked his computer. The password was taped to his desk. Morrison almost smiled. You're going to make my life very complicated. Sorry. No, you're not. The detective pulled out her phone and made a call. Yeah, it's Morrison. I need a forensic team at Mercy Point General. Full workup on financial records and electronic evidence. And get me a warrant for Vincent Cross. I want his office, his home, and every piece of paper with his name on it. She ended the call and looked at Emma. Go home. Get some sleep. I'll need a full statement tomorrow, but right now you look like you're about to fall over. Emma shook her head. I need to check on Jack first. Morrison sighed. He's at the Harbor Precinct giving his statement. He's fine. Scared, but fine. My people got there before anything bad happened. Your people or mine? Excuse me? Nothing. Emma headed toward the exit, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her legs felt heavy. Her head ached. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was burning off, leaving nothing but bone-deep fatigue. She made it to the parking lot before the shaking started. Emma leaned against her car, hands trembling, breath coming in short gasps. It hit her all at once. The gunshots, the hostages, the moment she'd crossed a line she'd sworn she'd never approach again. She'd called her old unit, requested tactical support, became operational again for the first time in 7 years. and it had felt terrifyingly natural. Emma fumbled her keys from her pocket and unlocked the car. She sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine, just breathing, trying to push down the memories threatening to surface. Yemen. The extraction. Her team leader bleeding out while Emma worked frantically to stop the hemorrhaging, knowing even as she did that it was already too late. "Stay with me," she'd whispered. "Come on, stay with me." But people didn't stay just because you asked them to. Emma pressed her palms against her eyes and forced the memory back down. Not now, not tonight. She had to keep moving, keep functioning, because the moment she stopped, everything would catch up. She started the car and drove home. Her apartment was a studio in a converted warehouse building near the waterfront. Cheap rent, thin walls, neighbors she'd never met. Emma unlocked the door and stepped into the dark space, not bothering with lights. She dropped her bag on the floor, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the bed, still wearing her scrubs. Sleep didn't come. Emma stared at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing headlights crawl across the plaster. Her phone buzzed every few minutes with messages she didn't read. At some point, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Too deliberate, too slow. She was off the bed and reaching for the tactical knife she kept in her nightstand before she'd consciously registered the threat. The footsteps passed by. Just a neighbor coming home late. Emma put the knife back and sat on the edge of the bed, head in her hands. She needed help, real help, the kind that came with therapy appointments and medications, and acknowledging that maybe, possibly, she hadn't processed her trauma as thoroughly as she'd convinced herself. But that would have to wait until tomorrow. For now, Emma stripped off her scrubs and stood under a scalding shower until her skin turned red and the water ran cold. She dressed in clean clothes, made coffee she didn't drink, and sat by the window watching the sun rise over Ridgeway Harbor. At 6:30 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Emma almost ignored it, then changed her mind. "Yeah." "Hartwell, it's Colonel Sarah Briggs. You remember me?" Emma's grip tightened on the phone. Briggs had commanded the Special Operations Medical Group when Emma was active. A hard woman with impossible standards and zero tolerance for anything less than perfection. "I remember," Emma said. "Good. Because we need to talk about that call you made last night." "I had a situation." "I read the report. Hostage crisis, corruption investigation, civilian asset in danger. You handled it." Briggs paused. "You also used a classified operations channel without authorization. That's a federal crime." "Are you charging me?" "Should I be?" Emma said nothing. Briggs sighed. "Here's the situation. Your clearance was revoked when you separated from service, but your access codes were never deactivated. Administrative oversight. Technically, you didn't break any laws because the system still recognized you as authorized personnel. Lucky me. Don't push it. What I want to know is whether this was a one-time emergency or if you're planning to make a habit of calling in tactical strikes on American soil." "One time." "You sure about that?" Emma watched the sunrise paint the harbor in shades of gold and red. "I left for a reason, Colonel. That hasn't changed." "Maybe. But you also just demonstrated that you're still capable of operational thinking under extreme pressure. The unit could use someone with your skills." "No." "Emma." "I said no. I did my time. I lost people. I'm done." Briggs was quiet for a long moment. "All right. I'll mark this as a closed incident and make sure your codes get properly deactivated. But if you change your mind, I won't." Emma ended the call before Briggs could say anything else. At 7 a.m., she returned to Mercy Point General for her meeting with Blackwell, only to find the hospital director's office sealed with police tape and a security guard stationed outside. Detective Morrison intercepted her in the hallway. "Meeting's canceled," Morrison said. "Blackwell was arrested an hour ago. He's being charged with fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and attempted murder." "What about Vincent Cross?" "His office was raided at dawn. We found evidence linking him to the robbery, text messages coordinating the timing, payments to the gunman, the whole operation. Turns out your hospital director was planning to fake his own death during the attack and disappear with Cross's help." Emma processed that. The phone call during the robbery, that was Cross warning them it was falling apart. Exactly. Once you disarmed that first gunman, the whole plan went sideways. Cross tried to pull the plug, but it was too late. Morrison pulled out her notebook. We also found evidence that Blackwell had been systematically sabotaging hospital security for months. Every failure you reported, every broken system, he made sure they stayed broken specifically to facilitate the robbery. How many people knew? We're still investigating, but it looks like Diane Porter was aware of at least some of it. Emma's stomach dropped. Diane? She received payments from the same offshore account as Blackwell. Smaller amounts, but consistent. We think she was helping him cover up the security failures and targeting anyone who asked too many questions. Like Emma. Morrison closed her notebook. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. You okay with that? Yeah. Good. Because this case is going to be high profile. Hospital corruption, attempted mass casualty event, special operations intervention. The media is going to eat it up. Emma had already started to turn away. I don't want publicity. Too late. You're already a hero. Emma stopped. I'm not a hero. I'm a nurse who did her job. You're a decorated combat veteran who saved 47 lives and exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud conspiracy. That's the definition of a hero, whether you like it or not. Emma didn't respond. She left Morrison in the hallway and headed toward the ER, where the morning shift was already in full swing. The department looked normal. Patients in beds, monitors beeping, nurses moving between rooms with practiced efficiency. But the atmosphere had changed. Emma felt it the moment she walked through the doors. Staff members stopped talking as she passed. A few nodded, a few smiled. Kelly, who'd been sobbing in terror just hours ago, actually approached her. Hey, I just wanted to say thank you for last night. Emma nodded awkwardly. You okay? Shaken up, but yeah. Kelly hesitated. I'm sorry for how I treated you before. I don't know what I thought, but I was wrong. Before Emma could respond, Dr. Vance appeared from one of the trauma bays. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes, rumpled clothes, hands shaking slightly. Emma, can we talk? They moved to an empty exam room. Vance closed the door and leaned against it like he needed the support. I froze last night, he said. When those men came in with guns, I completely froze. I couldn't think, couldn't act. I was useless. You were scared. Everyone was scared. But you weren't. You moved like... Vance shook his head. I've been a physician for 12 years. I've run codes, handled mass casualties, made life or death decisions under pressure. But last night I fell apart. And you, a nurse I've barely spoken to in 3 years, handled it like it was routine. Emma didn't know what to say. Vance continued. I looked you up after the police left, found an article from 2018. You received a Distinguished Service Medal for evacuating 17 wounded soldiers under fire. The citation said you provided emergency medical treatment while actively engaged with enemy combatants. That was a long time ago. You were 22 years old. Most people that age are figuring out their college majors, and you were running combat extractions in Yemen. Vance met her eyes. Why are you here? Why Mercy Point? You could be anywhere, doing anything. I wanted normal. Is it working? Emma thought about the gun in her hand last night, the way her body had moved without conscious thought, the ease with which she'd called in a tactical strike and threatened a hospital director. Not really, she admitted. Vance managed a weak smile. Yeah, I figured. He pushed off from the door. For what it's worth, I'm glad you were here. We'd all be dead if you weren't. He left before Emma could respond. The rest of the morning blurred past in a haze of normal ER chaos. Emma treated a diabetic emergency, splinted a broken ankle, and talked a panicking teenager through a severe allergic reaction. The work was familiar, grounding, exactly what she needed after the previous night's violence. At noon, Jack Ramirez rolled into the break room where Emma was eating a sandwich she couldn't taste. You look terrible, Jack said. Thanks. I mean it. You need sleep. I need about 6 different things. Sleep's pretty far down the list. Jack positioned his wheelchair across from her. I talked to Walter this morning. He wants to meet with you. Why? Because you saved his life, twice, and because he thinks you're one of the few people in this city who actually gives a damn about doing the right thing. Jack paused. He's also got some information you might want to hear. About what? Vincent Cross. Turns out Walter's nephew works in the DA's office. He's been investigating Cross for years but could never make anything stick. Now, with everything that happened last night, they finally have enough evidence to move forward. Emma set down her sandwich. What kind of evidence? Cross has been running a construction fraud scheme across 3 states. Fake contracts, inflated invoices, kickbacks to city officials. Your hospital director was just one of dozens of people on his payroll. Jack leaned forward. The DA thinks this could bring down half the city government if they follow the money far enough. That's not my problem. Maybe not. But Walter's nephew wants to talk to you. He thinks you might have seen or heard things that could help the investigation. Emma was about to refuse when her phone buzzed. Text from Detective Morrison. Need you at the station. New development. She showed the message to Jack. Looks like I'm going whether I want to or not. The Ridgeway Police Station was a concrete block building that had seen better decades. Emma found Morrison in an interrogation room, sitting across from a man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. This is Thomas Garrett, Morrison said. He's Vincent Cross's attorney. He wants to make a deal. Garrett cleared his throat. My client is willing to provide testimony against Marcus Blackwell and several city officials in exchange for reduced charges. Your client orchestrated an armed robbery that put 47 people in danger, Emma interrupted. What kind of reduced charges are we talking about? Garrett's expression hardened. My client had no direct involvement in the robbery. That was Blackwell's operation. Mr. Cross merely provided logistical support under duress. He paid the gunmen. He coordinated the timing. He called them during the robbery to abort the mission when it went bad. Emma looked at Morrison. You have all of this on record? We do, Morrison confirmed. Garrett shifted tactics. Look, Vincent Cross has information on corruption that goes all the way to the mayor's office. Names, dates, financial records. He's willing to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity from the most serious charges. Emma stood up. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a cop, but I know what I saw last night, and I know that making deals with people like Cross is how they keep getting away with it. She looked at Morrison. Do whatever you think is right. I'll testify to what I witnessed. The rest is your call. She left the interrogation room and walked outside, needing air. The afternoon sun was harsh, making her squint. Emma leaned against the building and closed her eyes, trying to organize her thoughts. Everything was moving too fast. Arrests, investigations, plea deals. She'd wanted normal, quiet. A life where the hardest decision was which IV gauge to use. Instead, she'd blown up her entire existence in one night. Emma Hartwell? She opened her eyes to find a woman in her 60s standing nearby. Silver hair, sharp eyes, wearing a blazer that screamed federal agent. Who's asking? The woman held up credentials. Special Agent Linda Vasquez, FBI. I'm heading up the investigation into Cross's fraud network. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I already gave my statement to Detective Morrison. This isn't about last night. This is about what comes next. Vasquez gestured toward a bench. Mind if we sit? Emma followed her to the bench, suddenly too tired to argue. Vasquez pulled out a tablet and swiped through several documents. Vincent Cross has been on our radar for 5 years. He's got connections in organized crime, corrupt officials in 7 states, and a network that launders money through construction contracts. We've been trying to build a RICO case against him, but he's careful. Very careful. What does that have to do with me? Your testimony puts Cross directly at the scene of a federal crime. Conspiracy to commit armed robbery at a medical facility is a federal offense. That gives us leverage we didn't have before. Vasquez looked up from her tablet. But Cross is going to fight back, hard. He'll come after your credibility, your background, anything he can use to discredit you. Let him try. He'll dig into your military service, find out about Yemen, use it against you. Emma's hands tightened. That was classified. Classification doesn't mean much when you're fighting for your freedom in federal court. Cross has money and connections. He'll leak whatever he needs to survive. So what are you telling me? Vasquez closed her tablet. I'm telling you that if you proceed with this testimony, your past is going to become very public. The media will find out who you were, what you did. Your quiet civilian life ends the moment you step into that courtroom. Emma stared across the parking lot, watching heat shimmer off the asphalt. She'd spent 7 years building walls between her military service and her civilian identity. 7 years convincing herself she could be normal if she just tried hard enough. One night had torn all of it down. "When's the trial?" Emma asked. "Preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks. Full trial probably 6 months out." "I'll be there." Vasquez nodded slowly. "You sure about this? Once you commit, there's no backing out." "I'm sure." The FBI agent stood and handed Emma a business card. "Call me if you need anything. Witness protection, security concerns, legal questions, anything. This case is going to get ugly, and I want to make sure you're protected." Emma took the card and watched Vasquez walk away. She sat on the bench for a long time, thinking about choices and consequences and the fact that doing the right thing never seemed to come without a price. Her phone rang. Another unknown number. Hartwell. "It's Walter Briggs. Jack said you might want to talk." Emma almost said no. Almost hung up and went home and tried to pretend the last 24 hours hadn't happened. Instead, she said, "Yeah, where are you?" "Veterans Center on Elm Street. You know it?" "I'll find it." Emma drove across town to a converted community center that smelled like old coffee and floor polish. Walter was waiting in the lobby, his ribs bandaged and his face still bruised from the robbery. "You came," he said. "Jack said you had information." "I do, but first—" Walter extended his hand. "Thank you for what you did." Emma shook it. "You already thanked me." "Not properly." Walter gestured toward a meeting room. "Come on, there's someone you should meet." Inside the room, a younger man in a suit stood by a whiteboard covered in names and arrows. He looked up as Emma entered. "Emma Hartwell, this is my nephew, David Briggs, Assistant District Attorney." David shook Emma's hand. "Thanks for coming. I know you've had a hell of a day." "You could say that." David pointed to the whiteboard. "This is what we've been building for 3 years. Vincent Cross sits at the center of a corruption network that spans multiple states. He bribes officials, falsifies contracts, and uses intimidation to silence anyone who asks questions. We've identified 47 separate incidents of fraud, but we couldn't connect them directly to Cross. Until now." Emma studied the board. Names she recognized: city council members, construction company executives, hospital administrators, and in the center, Vincent Cross. "Your testimony changes everything," David continued. "It establishes a direct link between Cross and a violent federal crime. That opens doors for us to subpoena financial records, communications, everything we need to dismantle his operation." "What about the people he's corrupted?" Emma asked. "The politicians, the officials." "They'll fall too. Once we flip Cross's associates and trace the money, the whole structure collapses." David paused. "But it won't be easy. Cross has resources. He'll fight back with everything he has." "Agent Vasquez already warned me." "Good. Then you know what you're walking into." David crossed his arms. "Here's what I need from you. Complete honesty about everything that happened last night. Every detail, every conversation. And I need you to be prepared for Cross's attorneys to attack your credibility. They'll bring up your military service, your medical discharge, anything they can use." "I wasn't medically discharged." David blinked. "The records say—" "The records are classified. What they show publicly isn't the whole story." Walter was watching Emma with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What is the whole story?" Emma sat down, suddenly exhausted. "I served in a classified unit attached to Special Operations Command. We provided advanced trauma care in combat zones. Yemen, Somalia, Syria, places that officially we were never in. I separated from service after a mission went wrong and my team leader died. That's all you need to know." "Why hide it?" Walter asked. "That's honorable service." "Because I was trying to be someone else, someone normal, who didn't wake up at 3 a.m. checking windows and cataloging threats." Emma looked at David. "You want my testimony? You've got it, but understand that I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who did her job and got tired of watching people get hurt." David nodded. "That's good enough for me." They spent the next hour going over details: timeline, witnesses, evidence. By the time Emma left the Veterans Center, the sun was setting and her head was pounding. She drove back to Mercy Point General, not sure why. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because it was the only place that felt remotely familiar. The ER was quiet for a Tuesday evening. Just the usual collection of minor injuries and chronic problems. Emma walked through the department noting changes. New security guards at the checkpoint, fresh cameras in the corners. Someone had actually fixed the broken door lock she'd reported 6 months ago. Diane Porter was at the nurse's station, filling out paperwork. She looked up as Emma approached, her expression unreadable. "Heard you've had an exciting couple of days," Diane said. "You could say that." Diane set down her pen. "For what it's worth, I didn't know about the robbery. Blackwell told me he was fixing the security issues quietly, that going through official channels would take too long. I believed him. But you took his money." "I took consulting fees for administrative work. That's different than—" "Is it?" Emma leaned against the desk. "You knew something was wrong, Diane. You knew, and you looked the other way because it was easier than asking questions." Diane's face hardened. "Don't lecture me about ethics. You broke into the director's office. To save lives. To play vigilante. There's a difference." Emma straightened. "You're right. There is a difference. I'm willing to face consequences for what I did. Are you?" Diane didn't answer. Emma walked away, heading toward the exit. She was halfway across the parking lot when her phone buzzed again. Text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed quiet. Now people are going to get hurt, and it's on you." Emma stared at the message, her pulse quickening. She tried calling the number back. Disconnected. She forwarded the message to Detective Morrison and Agent Vasquez, then stood in the parking lot scanning for threats. Empty cars. Dark shadows. The kind of environment where someone could be watching from a dozen different positions. Emma's hand moved to her pocket, fingers finding the challenge coin she'd carried since this morning. The metal was warm against her palm, familiar. She got in her car and drove home, checking her mirrors every 30 seconds. Her apartment building looked normal. No suspicious vehicles, no one lurking in the hallway. Emma unlocked her door and did a quick sweep of the studio, closet, bathroom, under the bed. Everything clear. She locked the door, set her phone on the nightstand, and lay down fully clothed. Sleep still wouldn't come. At midnight, Emma heard footsteps in the hallway again, slow, deliberate. They stopped outside her door. Emma was off the bed with her tactical knife in hand before the footsteps moved on. She stood in the dark, listening, heart hammering. This was her life now. Looking over her shoulder, waiting for threats, becoming the soldier she'd tried so hard to leave behind. Emma set down the knife and pulled out her phone. Scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for the Veterans Crisis Line. Stared at it for a long time. Then she put the phone away and returned to bed. At 3 a.m., someone knocked on her door. Emma rolled off the mattress, grabbed the knife, and moved to the wall beside the entrance. "Who is it?" "Jack Ramirez. Don't stab me." Emma opened the door. Jack sat in his wheelchair holding 2 cups of coffee. "You sleep in your clothes now?" Jack asked. "What are you doing here?" "Couldn't sleep. Figured you couldn't either." He rolled inside without being invited. "Also got a text from Detective Morrison saying you received a threat. Thought you might want company." Emma closed and locked the door. "How'd you know where I live?" "Employee directory. You're not as invisible as you think." They sat at Emma's small kitchen table, drinking coffee in silence. After a few minutes, Jack spoke. "You know what the worst part of getting shot was?" Emma looked up. "You got shot?" "Iraq. 2004. Sniper round through the spine. Took me 6 months to accept I'd never walk again." Jack sipped his coffee. "But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was everyone treating me like I was broken. Like being in a wheelchair meant I couldn't function, couldn't contribute, couldn't be useful." "Where are you going with this?" "You've been treating yourself the same way, like your military service broke something in you that can't be fixed. But from where I'm sitting, you're the most functional person in this entire hospital." Emma shook her head. "I called in a tactical strike on American soil, Jack. That's not functional. That's you using every tool available to save a life, just like you did in Yemen, just like you did in the ER during the robbery." Jack leaned forward. "Stop punishing yourself for being good at what you do. People died because of what I did. My team leader died in combat, in a war zone, doing the job he signed up for." Jack's voice softened. "Emma, you can't carry that weight forever. At some point you have to put it down. Emma stared into her coffee cup, seeing reflections of things she'd tried to forget. I don't know how. Start by accepting that you're still a soldier. Maybe not active duty, maybe not in uniform, but you're still a soldier, and there's nothing wrong with that. They sat in silence until the sun rose. At 7 a.m., Emma's phone rang. Detective Morrison. We've got a problem, Morrison said without preamble. Vincent Cross made bail 2 hours ago. Emma's grip tightened on the phone. How? Judge accepted a $2 million bond. Cross's attorney argued he wasn't a flight risk. Morrison paused. Emma, he knows where you live. We pulled his phone records. There's been communication with known associates in Ridgeway. I think he's planning something. Like what? Like making sure you never testify. I'm sending a patrol car to your building. Stay inside until... The line went dead. Emma looked at her phone. Call dropped. She tried calling back. No signal. Someone had jammed her cell service. Emma moved to the window and looked down at the street. A black sedan was parked across from her building. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, watching her window. Jack rolled his wheelchair closer. Emma, what's wrong? Emma grabbed her tactical knife and her challenge coin. Cross is here. And he brought friends. Jack's eyes went to the window, then back to Emma. How many? 2 visible. Probably more in the building. Emma moved away from the glass, keeping low. They jammed my cell signal. Professional setup. What do they want? Me quiet. Permanently. Jack spun his wheelchair toward the door. Fire escape? Leads to an alley. They'll have it covered. Front entrance? Same problem. Emma checked the tactical knife, 6 inches of steel that wouldn't do much against firearms. We need to get word out. Can you get a signal on your phone? Jack pulled out his cell, shook his head. Dead. Emma's mind raced through options. Cross had money and connections, which meant the men outside weren't amateurs. They'd have planned this carefully, blocking communications, establishing perimeter security, timing the assault for maximum efficiency. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed Emma would wait for them to make the first move. Stay away from the windows, Emma said. She crossed to her closet and pulled out a duffel bag she hadn't opened in 7 years. Inside was equipment from another life. Tactical flashlight, paracord, smoke grenade she'd kept as a souvenir from her last deployment. And buried at the bottom, wrapped in oiled cloth, a Glock 19 she'd told herself she'd never need again. Jack stared at the weapon. You've been holding out. Old habits. Emma checked the magazine. 15 rounds, 1 in the chamber. The gun felt familiar in her hand, muscle memory kicking in despite 7 years of civilian life. I'm going out the front. Draw their attention. You get to the building superintendent's apartment, 3rd floor, Unit 3C. Tell him to call 911 and barricade himself inside. That's a terrible plan. It's the only plan. Those men aren't here to negotiate. So you're just going to shoot your way out? Emma holstered the Glock in her waistband and grabbed the smoke grenade. I'm going to create enough chaos that they can't execute cleanly. Then I'm going to disappear before they regroup. And if it doesn't work, then you tell Detective Morrison everything I found in Blackwell's office. Make sure Cross goes down even if I don't. Jack's jaw tightened. I didn't survive Iraq just to watch you commit suicide in Ridgeway. I'm not committing suicide. I'm controlling the engagement. Emma moved to the door, listening. Footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets, moving quietly. They're inside. You've got maybe 30 seconds. Move. Jack hesitated, then wheeled toward the bedroom window that faced the interior courtyard. Emma heard him working the latch, then the sound of his wheelchair bumping over the sill onto the fire escape. Emma counted to 5, then yanked open her front door. The hallway was empty, but she could hear movement on the stairs, someone ascending fast. She pulled the pin on the smoke grenade and tossed it down the corridor, then dropped low and moved in the opposite direction toward the rear stairwell. The grenade detonated with a hiss, filling the hallway with thick gray smoke. Voices shouted behind her. Footsteps pounded. Emma hit the stairwell door and descended 3 steps at a time, one hand on the railing, the other on her weapon. She reached the ground floor and burst through the exit into the alley. 2 men in suits were waiting. Emma didn't hesitate. She put 2 rounds center mass into the closer target, then pivoted and fired at the second man as he reached for his weapon. Both dropped. Emma kept moving, vaulting over a dumpster and cutting through a gap between buildings. Behind her, voices shouted coordinates. Radio chatter. They were coordinating a pursuit. Emma emerged onto a side street and ran hard, keeping to shadows, constantly changing direction. She'd trained for urban evasion in a dozen different cities, but theory and practice were different animals. Her lungs burned. Her legs ached. She wasn't 22 anymore, and her body was reminding her of that fact with every stride. She cut through a parking garage, emerged on the opposite side, and ducked into a 24-hour laundromat. An elderly woman folding clothes looked up in surprise. "Bathroom?" Emma gasped. The woman pointed wordlessly. Emma locked herself in the single-stall restroom and leaned against the door, breathing hard. She pulled out the Glock and ejected the magazine. 11 rounds left. Not enough if Cross had sent a full team. She needed backup, real backup. Emma checked her phone again. Still no signal. The jamming was localized, probably vehicle-mounted equipment parked near her building. If she could get far enough away, her phone would work again. She waited 2 minutes, then exited the bathroom and walked calmly past the elderly woman who was now studiously ignoring her. Outside, the street was quiet. No signs of pursuit. Emma headed north, moving quickly but not running. Running attracted attention. She needed to blend in, look normal, be invisible. 3 blocks later, her phone buzzed back to life. Emma immediately dialed Morrison's number. It rang once before the detective answered. "Where are you?" "Heading north from my apartment. Cross sent a team. At least 4 men, probably more. I neutralized 2. Morrison swore. "Are you injured?" "No, but I need extraction before—" A black sedan turned the corner ahead, moving fast. Emma recognized the vehicle from outside her building. She cut left into an alley, phone still pressed to her ear. "They're tracking me. I need backup now." "I'm 10 minutes out. Can you hold?" "I'll have to." Emma ended the call and kept moving, senses on high alert. The alley opened onto a commercial street lined with closed storefronts. A few early morning joggers, a homeless man pushing a shopping cart. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that a running gun battle was happening in their city. Emma spotted a coffee shop with lights on and ducked inside. The barista barely looked up from his espresso machine. "Help you?" "Large coffee. Black." While he poured, Emma positioned herself where she could watch the street through the window. The black sedan cruised past slowly, then turned at the next intersection. They'd lost her, temporarily. Emma paid for the coffee and sat at a corner table, keeping her back to the wall. She needed a plan beyond simple evasion. Cross had resources and manpower. He could keep hunting her indefinitely, unless she turned the tables. Emma pulled up David Briggs's number, Walter's nephew, the assistant DA. He answered on the second ring. "It's Emma Hartwell. I need everything you have on Vincent Cross's current location." "Why? What's happening?" "Cross sent a kill team to my apartment. I need to know where he is right now." David was quiet for a moment. "He posted bail at 6 a.m. His attorney said he'd be staying at his estate in the North Hills. But Emma, send me the address." "You can't go after him. I'm not going after him. I'm going to make him come to me." Emma ended the call before David could argue. Seconds later, her phone buzzed with an address and a satellite image of a sprawling property surrounded by walls and security gates. She studied the layout, committing it to memory. Then she called Agent Vasquez. "I need a favor," Emma said, "and I need it in the next 5 minutes." Vasquez listened while Emma explained her plan. When she finished, the FBI agent was quiet for a long moment. "That's insane," Vasquez said finally. "It'll work. It'll get you killed. Only if I'm wrong about Cross." Another pause. "All right, I'll make it happen. But Emma, if this goes sideways, I can't protect you from the consequences." "I'm not asking you to." Emma hung up and drained her coffee. Outside, dawn was breaking over Ridgeway in shades of orange and gray. The city looked almost peaceful from here. Just another Tuesday morning, people heading to work, unaware of the corruption rotting beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed, text from Vasquez. "Done. You've got 20 minutes before he figures it out." Emma stood and left the coffee shop. She walked 4 blocks to a bus stop, caught the northbound route, and rode it to the edge of the city where hills rose toward expensive neighborhoods. She got off at the last stop and hiked the remaining mile to Cross's estate. The property was exactly what she'd expected. 10-foot walls, security cameras, a gate that probably cost more than Emma's annual salary. She could see the main house through the bars, a modern monstrosity of glass and steel that screamed new money. Emma circled the perimeter until she found what she was looking for, a service entrance partially hidden by landscaping. The gate was locked, but the camera above it had a wire running along the wall to a junction box 20 feet away. Emma climbed the wall, dropped into the property, and moved quickly toward the junction box. She opened it and found the camera feeds, all running through a single wireless hub. Amateur security trying to look professional. She pulled the hub's power cable. The cameras went dark. Emma crossed the lawn toward the main house, expecting alarms, guard dogs, armed security. Instead, she found only silence. Cross had sent his muscle into the city to hunt her, leaving his home base vulnerable. Tactical mistake. Emma tried the back door. Unlocked. She stepped into a kitchen that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. Marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, zero personality. Voices drifted from somewhere deeper in the house. Emma moved silently through the kitchen into a hallway lined with expensive art. The voices grew louder, two men arguing in what sounded like a study. "I don't care what it costs," Cross was saying. "Find her and finish it. We can't let her testify." "Your guys lost her downtown," another voice replied. "She's trained, former military. This isn't some civilian we can intimidate." "Then stop treating it like intimidation and start treating it like elimination." Emma stepped into the doorway. Too late for that. Both men spun toward her. Cross was exactly what Emma had pictured. Late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of face that looked good in campaign photos. His companion was younger, harder, wearing a shoulder holster that held a very visible handgun. The younger man reached for his weapon. Emma had the Glock out faster, aimed center mass. "Don't!" He froze. Emma kept the gun trained on him while addressing Cross. "Here's what's going to happen. Your associate is going to put his weapon on the desk very slowly. Then you're both going to sit down while we wait for the FBI to arrive." Cross's expression shifted from shock to something closer to amusement. "You're bluffing. The FBI isn't coming. Check your phone." Cross pulled out his cell and stared at the screen. Emma watched his face go pale. Vasquez had done her job. The FBI had just announced a press conference in 2 hours, a major breakthrough in a multi-state corruption investigation involving construction fraud and organized crime. Vincent Cross's name was listed as the primary defendant. "They can't do this," Cross stammered. "I made bail. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Emma said. "I'd recommend using it." The younger man's hand twitched toward his weapon. Emma shifted her aim slightly. "I'm a decorated combat veteran with a confirmed kill count in double digits. You're a hired thug who probably learned to shoot at a range. Think carefully about your next move." He put his hands up. "Weapon on the desk, now." He complied slowly, placing a compact 9mm on the polished wood surface. "Kick it toward me." He did. Emma collected it without taking her eyes off either man. "Sit." They sat. Emma pulled out her phone and dialed Morrison. "I'm at Cross's estate, North Hills 4782 Ridgemont Drive. I've got Cross and one associate secured. Send backup." "Are you out of your mind?" Morrison shouted. "You can't just—" "I can and I did. Clock's ticking. Get here before I have to shoot someone." Emma ended the call and pocketed her phone. Cross leaned back in his chair, trying to regain composure. "You've made a serious mistake, Ms. Hartwell. I have attorneys who will bury you in lawsuits. I have connections that reach all the way to prison?" Emma interrupted. "Because that's where you're going. Blackwell's talking. His laptop had everything, financial records, emails, payment schedules. The DA has enough evidence to put you away for 20 years minimum. Marcus is lying to save himself. Marcus has phone records showing 53 calls to your personal number in the past 6 months. He has text messages coordinating the robbery. He has bank statements showing payments from your shell companies." Emma let that sink in. "You're done, Cross. The only question now is how many people you take down with you." The younger man shifted in his seat. Emma's gun tracked the movement. "Stay still." He froze again. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Cross's face hardened. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a nurse who got lucky. Nobody's going to remember you in 6 months. I don't need them to remember me. I need them to remember what you did, how you stole millions, how you put 47 people in danger, how you tried to have me killed when I got too close to the truth. You have no proof of that. I have 2 bodies in an alley behind my apartment building. I have ballistic evidence. I have cell phone records showing your hired muscle coordinated their attack from vehicles registered to your companies. Emma smiled without warmth. I have everything I need. You just made it easier by confirming it all 30 seconds ago. Cross went very still. What? Emma pulled out her phone and stopped the recording app that had been running since she'd entered the study. Attempted murder is a federal offense when it's done to prevent testimony in a federal case. You just confessed on tape. The color drained from Cross's face. The sirens were getting closer now. Emma could hear vehicles pulling up outside, doors slamming, voices shouting. The study door burst open. Detective Morrison entered with 4 uniformed officers, weapons drawn. On the ground, both of you, now! Cross and his associate dropped to the floor. Morrison's officers secured them with zip ties while the detective crossed to Emma. You want to explain what the hell you were thinking? Emma handed over both weapons, hers and the one she'd confiscated. I was thinking Cross needed to incriminate himself. Seemed like the fastest way to make sure he couldn't walk away from this. Morrison took the guns and the phone containing the recording. She listened to 30 seconds of it, then shook her head. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the dumbest. I can't decide which. Can't I be both? Apparently, Morrison gestured to her officers. Get them in transport. I want Cross at the federal building in 30 minutes. As they hauled Cross to his feet, the developer finally broke. This isn't over. I have friends, powerful friends, people who will make sure you pay for this. Morrison cut him off. Mr. Cross, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it before you make things worse for yourself. They dragged him out of the study, still shouting threats. Emma stood in the sudden silence, adrenaline finally starting to ebb. Her hands shook slightly. Her legs felt weak. She'd been running on pure survival instinct for the past hour, and now that the immediate danger had passed, her body was reminding her that she was human. Morrison returned and guided Emma to a chair. Sit, before you fall over. Emma sat. You know you probably just violated about 15 different laws, right? Morrison said. Breaking and entering, illegal detention, unauthorized recording. Add them to my file. I'm serious. Cross's lawyers are going to tear into this. They'll claim coercion, illegal search, violation of his rights. He sent armed men to kill me. I defended myself and gathered evidence of his crimes. Any jury will understand that. Morrison sighed. You're probably right. Doesn't mean I have to like it. She pulled out her notebook. Walk me through everything. Start from when you left your apartment. Emma spent the next 20 minutes detailing the pursuit, the shootout, and her decision to confront Cross directly. Morrison took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just listening. When Emma finished, Morrison closed her notebook. The 2 men you shot in the alley, they're both alive. Critical condition, but they'll survive to stand trial. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. She'd aimed to stop threats, not kill anyone, but in the moment she hadn't had time to be careful. What about Jack? Emma asked. Is he okay? Building superintendent called 911 like you told him to. Jack's fine. He's at the station giving his statement. Morrison paused. He also told me about your military background, the Special Operations Medical Group. Why didn't you mention that before? Because it wasn't relevant. Not relevant. You're a decorated combat veteran who specialized in trauma care under fire. That's extremely relevant to everything that's happened. Emma met Morrison's eyes. I left the military because I wanted to be normal. I wanted to help people without bullets flying. I thought if I could just be a regular nurse, maybe I could forget. She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter. That life's over now anyway. Maybe. Or maybe you just stopped pretending to be something you're not. Before Emma could respond, Agent Vasquez appeared in the doorway. The FBI agent looked simultaneously impressed and irritated. Nice work getting Cross on tape, Vasquez said. Also, Incredibly reckless and potentially illegal. So I've been told. Vasquez crossed the study and sat down across from Emma. Here's where we stand. Cross is going to federal lockup pending trial. His attorneys are already filing motions, but the evidence is overwhelming. Between Blackwell's testimony, the financial records, and your recording, we have him dead to rights. What about his connections, the politicians, the judges? We're working on that. Cross kept detailed records, insurance policy probably. Once we go through his files, we'll have enough evidence to prosecute the entire network. Vasquez leaned forward. But it's going to take time, months, maybe years. And during that time, you're going to be a target. Cross has friends who won't hesitate to retaliate. So what are you suggesting? Witness protection, new identity, new city, full relocation. Emma almost laughed. I've spent 7 years trying to be someone else. I'm not doing it again. Even if it keeps you alive? Especially if it keeps me alive. I didn't survive Yemen and expose a corruption ring just to spend the rest of my life hiding in some random town pretending to be a different person. Emma stood. I'm staying in Ridgeway. I'm testifying against Cross. And if anyone wants to come after me, they're welcome to try. Vasquez exchanged a look with Morrison. She always this stubborn? Apparently, Morrison said. Vasquez pulled out a business card and handed it to Emma. Fine. But you take basic precautions. Vary your routes, check your surroundings, report any suspicious activity, and you stay in contact with my office daily until the trial is over. Emma pocketed the card. Deal. The FBI agent left to coordinate evidence collection, leaving Emma alone with Morrison. You need a ride back to the city? Morrison asked. Yeah, my car's still at my apartment building, which is probably a crime scene now. Multiple crime scenes, actually. We've got the alley, your apartment, the hallway, and the street where Cross's team lost you. Morrison stood. Come on, I'll drive you. We can talk about your statement on the way. They walked outside into bright morning sunlight. The estate grounds were now swarming with federal agents photographing evidence, collecting files, and methodically documenting every detail of Cross's operation. Emma caught a glimpse of Cross in the back of a police transport, staring straight ahead with an expression of absolute fury. Good. Let him be furious. Let him rage against the consequences of his own actions. Emma climbed into Morrison's unmarked sedan and they headed back toward the city. The detective drove in silence for a few minutes before speaking. You're going to be famous after this. Media's already picking up the story. Decorated veteran exposes hospital corruption, survives assassination attempt, brings down major fraud ring. That's headline gold. I don't want to be famous. Too late. Your face is going to be everywhere by tomorrow morning. Morrison glanced over. How are you going to handle that? Emma watched the city passing by outside the window. One day at a time, same as everything else. They reached her apartment building to find it cordoned off with police tape. Crime scene techs were still processing the alley where Emma had shot Cross's men. Residents stood in clusters on the sidewalk, watching the show. Emma spotted Jack near the building entrance, talking to an officer. He saw her and wheeled over immediately. You're alive, Jack said. Disappointed? Relieved. Also slightly terrified of you now. Emma managed a weak smile. How's Walter? Watching the news coverage from the Veterans Center. I think he's planning to adopt you. Jack gestured at the building. They're not letting anyone back inside yet. Crime scene's still active. Where am I supposed to go? My place. I've got a guest room and a couch that's more comfortable than it looks. You can stay until they clear your apartment. Emma started to refuse, then realized she didn't have better options. Her apartment was a crime scene. Her car was blocked in by police vehicles. She had nowhere else to go. Thanks, she said. Jack's apartment was in a converted warehouse on the east side. Accessible entrance, wide doorways, everything designed for wheelchair navigation. He made coffee while Emma collapsed onto the promised couch. You should sleep, Jack said, handing her a mug. Can't. Too wired. Then at least eat something. You look like you're about to pass out. Jack ordered takeout, breakfast sandwiches from a place that delivered. While they waited, Emma's phone started buzzing with messages. News alerts, friend requests, interview offers from media outlets she'd never heard of. She turned off the phone. You're going to have to deal with that eventually, Jack said. Not today. The food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence, both too exhausted to make conversation. Emma was halfway through her sandwich when her phone, still off, started vibrating on the table. Someone was calling the landline Jack had given as a contact number. Jack answered. Listened. His expression shifted. "It's for you," he said, handing Emma the receiver. "Says she's from Mercy Point General. Hospital board wants to talk to you." Emma took the phone. "This is Emma Hartwell." "Ms. Hartwell, this is Patricia Winters, chairwoman of the hospital board. I'm calling to formally invite you to a meeting this afternoon. We have several matters to discuss regarding recent events." "What kind of matters?" "The board would prefer to discuss them in person. Would 2 p.m. work for you?" Emma checked the time, 11 a.m. "I'll be there." She hung up and looked at Jack. "They're probably going to fire me. Or promote you. After I broke into the director's office and exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, they're definitely firing me. Only one way to find out." At 2 p.m., Emma walked into Mercy Point General's administrative conference room wearing borrowed clothes from Jack's ex-wife's closet, slacks and a blazer that almost fit. The hospital board sat around a long table, 7 people in business attire, all wearing expressions she couldn't quite read. Patricia Winters gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit." Emma sat. Winters folded her hands on the table. "Ms. Hartwell, this board owes you an apology. For 3 years, you reported security failures, staffing issues, and safety concerns. Each time, your warnings were dismissed or ignored. Had we listened, the events of the past few days might have been prevented." Emma said nothing. "Marcus Blackwell systematically undermined this hospital's integrity," Winters continued. "He stole funds meant for patient care, endangered staff and civilians, and created an environment where corruption could flourish. His actions have caused immeasurable damage to Mercy Point's reputation and operations." "I'm aware," Emma said. "What you may not be aware of is that the board has been conducting its own investigation since Blackwell's arrest. We've discovered extensive evidence of mismanagement, fraudulent contracts, and deliberate sabotage of hospital systems. The scope of his corruption is staggering." Winters pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "This is a summary of our findings. We're sharing it with you because your testimony will be crucial in the upcoming trials, both criminal and civil. But more importantly, we're sharing it because you deserve to know the truth about what you uncovered." Emma opened the folder. Inside were financial statements, email threads, and investigative reports detailing Blackwell's network of fraud. Millions of dollars diverted. Safety systems deliberately disabled, staff members intimidated or fired for asking questions. "Diane Porter has also been suspended pending investigation," Winters added. "Her cooperation with Blackwell's scheme, even if passive, constitutes a serious breach of professional ethics." Emma closed the folder. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the board wants to offer you a position." Emma blinked. "Excuse me?" Winters smiled slightly. "Director of Emergency Services, full administrative authority over the ER, direct reporting to the board, complete autonomy over staffing and safety protocols. We need someone with integrity, courage, and the backbone to stand up when things go wrong. You've demonstrated all 3. I'm 29 years old. I've been a nurse for 3 years. I have no management experience. You have military leadership experience. You have the respect of the ER staff, those who aren't currently suspended or under investigation anyway. And you have the trust of this board." Winters leaned forward. "We're not asking you to be perfect, Ms. Hartwell. We're asking you to be honest, to rebuild what Blackwell destroyed, to make Mercy Point a place where people come first again." Emma sat in stunned silence. "Take some time to think about it," Winters said. "But we need an answer within 48 hours. We're announcing major restructuring to the press, and we'd like to include your appointment in that announcement." The meeting ended. Emma walked out of the conference room in a daze. She found Jack waiting in the lobby, crossword puzzle in his lap. "Well?" he asked. "They offered me a promotion, Director of Emergency Services." Jack's eyes widened. "Holy, are you taking it?" "I don't know. It's too much, too fast." "It's exactly what you deserve." Emma sat down beside him. 3 days ago, I was the nurse nobody took seriously. Now I'm supposed to run the entire department? That doesn't make sense." Sure it does. You proved you're the only person in this hospital who actually gives a damn about doing the right thing. Jack set down his puzzle. Emma, you spent 7 years hiding from who you are. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. Emma's phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on for the hospital meeting. Text from David Briggs. Cross's attorney just withdrew. 2 more defendants flipped. The whole network is collapsing. You did this. Another text, this one from Walter. Veterans Center wants to honor you at next month's ceremony. Will you come? Another from Agent Vasquez. Preliminary hearing moved up. 2 weeks. Hope you're ready. Emma stared at the messages, feeling the weight of expectation settling onto her shoulders like a familiar pack. She'd spent years trying to be invisible, trying to pretend she was just another civilian nurse with no history and no skills beyond basic patient care. That pretense was dead now. The question was, who did she want to be instead? Emma stood. I need to see someone. She took a cab to the Veterans Center where Walter was working with a physical therapy patient. He saw her through the window and waved her inside. Emma, didn't expect you today. I need advice. Walter dismissed his patient and gestured Emma into his office. A cramped space filled with military memorabilia and photos from deployments Emma recognized. What's on your mind? Walter asked. Mercy Point offered me a director position, full authority over the ER, and I don't know if I can do it. Why not? Because I'm not qualified. Because I'm still figuring out how to be a regular person again. Because every time I close my eyes, I see... Emma stopped. I'm broken, Walter. I don't know how to lead people when I can barely hold myself together. Walter was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled a photo from his desk drawer and handed it to Emma. It showed a younger Walter in combat fatigues, standing with his unit somewhere in Central America. He looked confident, capable, whole. That was taken 3 months before I got shot, Walter said. I thought I had everything figured out, thought I was invincible. Then I took a bullet to the spine and spent 6 months in a VA hospital learning how to use a wheelchair. I'm sorry. Don't be. That injury taught me something important. Being broken doesn't mean being useless. It just means being human. Walter took back the photo. You think you're the only veteran struggling with what comes after service. Every person in this building has demons, Emma. The difference is what you do with them. And what am I supposed to do? Use them. Let your experience inform your leadership. Let your trauma make you more compassionate, not less. Let your survival make you stronger. Walter met her eyes. You're not broken, Emma. You're a survivor. And Mercy Point needs survivors right now. Emma left the Veterans Center as the sun was setting, Walter's words echoing in her mind. She walked back to Jack's apartment and found him making dinner, pasta with store-bought sauce, nothing fancy. You figure it out? Jack asked. Maybe. They ate together, watching the news coverage of Cross's arrest and Blackwell's corruption scandal. Emma's face appeared on screen, footage from the hospital, her military commendation photo, a still image from security cameras showing her during the robbery. The reporter called her a hero. Emma turned off the TV. I'm taking the job, she said. Jack smiled. Good. When do you start? Soon as they clear my apartment and I have clean clothes. You can borrow more from my ex-wife's closet. She won't mind. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time it was Morrison, Cross's associate, the one in his study, is talking. Names, dates, everything. This case just got a lot bigger. Prepare for a long legal battle. Emma set down the phone and looked at Jack. This isn't going to be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. They're going to come after me. Cross's people, his lawyers, everyone who benefited from the corruption. I'm going to have a target on my back for years. So you'll watch your back. You're good at that. Jack refilled their wine glasses. Besides, you're not alone anymore. You've got the hospital board, the DA's office, the FBI, the police department, and one extremely persistent wheelchair-bound veteran who refuses to let you self-destruct. That's a pretty good support network. Emma raised her glass. To support networks. To survivors, Jack corrected. They clinked glasses. 2 days later, Emma returned to her apartment to find it released from crime scene status, but thoroughly torn apart by investigators. She spent hours cleaning, organizing, trying to make the space feel like home again. Her phone rang. Unknown number. This is Emma. Ms. Hartwell, this is Thomas Garrett, Vincent Cross's former attorney. I'm calling to inform you that my client wishes to arrange a meeting. I'm not meeting with Cross. It's not what you think. Mr. Cross wants to offer information in exchange for consideration during sentencing. Information about his network, his associates, and the full scope of his operations. But he'll only talk to you. Emma almost hung up, almost told Garrett exactly where Cross could stick his offer. Instead, she said, "I'll think about it." She called Morrison and Vasquez, told them about Garrett's offer. They set up a meeting for the following day. Federal building, controlled environment, full security. Emma arrived at 10 a.m. to find Cross already in the interrogation room, wearing an orange jumpsuit and looking 20 years older than he had in his estate. Morrison and Vasquez flanked Emma as she sat across from Cross. "You wanted to talk," Emma said. "Talk." Cross leaned forward, hands cuffed to the table. "I can give you 43 names. Politicians, judges, contractors, city officials, all people who took money from my organization, all people who helped me operate for 15 years without consequences. In exchange for what? Reduced sentence, maybe minimum security instead of federal prison, maybe protection from the people who will want me dead once I start naming names." Emma studied him. "Why me? Why not your attorney? Why not the FBI?" "Because you're the only person in this entire mess who actually cares about justice. Not politics, not career advancement, not publicity, justice." Cross's expression was hollow. "I know what I am. I know what I did. I'm trying to make whatever's left of my life count for something." Emma looked at Morrison, then Vasquez. Both agents were carefully neutral. "What he's offering is valuable," Vasquez said quietly. "Those 43 names could dismantle corruption networks across 3 states." "And what happens to the people he hurt?" Emma asked. "The hospital workers who lost jobs? The patients who suffered because of broken systems? The families affected by his schemes?" "They get justice," Morrison said. "That's what happens when we prosecute the entire network instead of just Cross." Emma turned back to Cross. "You put a gun to my friend's head. You sent armed men to kill me. You enabled a robbery that terrorized 47 innocent people. And now you want a deal?" "I want to make it right." "You can't make it right. You can only own what you did and accept the consequences." Emma stood. "Give them your information. Name every corrupt official you worked with. But don't expect gratitude. Don't expect forgiveness. And don't expect me to care whether you spend the next 20 years in minimum security or maximum. You earned whatever you get." She walked out before Cross could respond. Morrison caught up with her in the hallway. "That was harsh." "He deserved harsh." "Maybe. But his information is still valuable." "Then use it. Prosecute everyone he names. But I don't have to pretend I care about his comfort while you do it." Emma left the federal building and returned to Mercy Point General, where her new office was being prepared. Small space, but it had a window overlooking the ER floor. She could watch the controlled chaos from here, see the staff working, the patients arriving, the constant flow of human crisis that defined emergency medicine. Patricia Winters appeared in the doorway. "How does it feel?" "Strange. Good strange, but still strange." "You'll get used to it." Winters handed Emma a folder. "Your first task as director. We need a complete security overhaul, new checkpoint systems, updated cameras, revised protocols. I want your recommendations by end of week." Emma took the folder. "I'll have them by tomorrow. Don't burn yourself out on day 1. "Too late." Winters smiled and left. Emma sat at her new desk and opened the folder. Security proposals, budget estimates, contractor options. Real work, important work. The kind of thing that would actually improve lives instead of just documenting problems nobody wanted to fix. Her phone buzzed. Text from Jack. Crossword clue. 9 letters. One who overcomes adversity. Starts with S. Emma smiled and typed back, survivor. Jack's response came immediately. Perfect fit. Emma set down her phone and looked out the window at the ER floor below. At the nurses moving between patients. At the doctors making impossible decisions. at the whole beautiful, messy, complicated system of people trying to help other people. She'd spent 7 years running from who she was. Maybe it was time to stop running and start building instead. Her office phone rang, internal line. Director Hartwell? The title still felt foreign in her mouth. Emma, it's Dr. Vance. We've got a mass casualty coming in. School bus accident, 15 patients, 5 critical. Can you come down? Emma was already moving toward the door. On my way. She hit the ER floor at a run, muscle memory kicking in. Military training merging seamlessly with civilian skills. Staff looked to her for direction, and she gave it, clear, confident, exactly what they needed. The chaos swirled around her, patients screaming, monitors beeping, voices shouting updates, and Emma stood at the center of it all, doing exactly what she'd been trained to do, saving lives, one patient at a time. The first ambulance arrived, and Emma moved to meet it, already triaging in her head, already planning treatment protocols, already 3 steps ahead of the emergency. Behind her, the ER staff worked in perfect synchronization, veterans and rookies, experienced nurses and new hires, all moving together with the kind of precision that came from trust. They trusted her now. The nurse they'd once dismissed had become the director they needed. Emma stabilized the first critical patient, 14-year-old with internal bleeding, and sent him to surgery. Then the second. Then the third. She worked for 6 straight hours, moving between patients, coordinating care, making impossible decisions with the kind of clarity that came from experience. When the last patient was stabilized and the ER finally quieted, Emma stood at the nurse's station taking inventory. 15 patients, 14 saved, 1 lost despite everything they'd tried. Dr. Vance appeared at her shoulder. You did good. Oh, we lost 1. We saved 14. That's the job. Emma nodded slowly. He was right. That was the job. Save who you can. Mourn who you can't. Keep moving forward because the next emergency was always coming. She filed her shift report and headed home as midnight approached. Her apartment was still a mess from the investigation, but it was hers. Safe. Quiet. Emma showered, changed into clean clothes, and sat by the window looking out at Ridgeway's lights. Somewhere in the city, Vincent Cross sat in a cell contemplating the ruins of his empire. Marcus Blackwell was probably doing the same. Diane Porter was suspended, her career in shambles. And Emma Hartwell, the nurse nobody had taken seriously, sat in an apartment she'd almost died defending, preparing for a trial that would reshape the city's power structure. Her phone buzzed one last time. Text from an unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. This isn't over. Emma stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it, blocked the number, and turned off her phone. Let them come. She'd survived worse. And if Cross's network wanted war, she'd give them exactly what they'd given her. Absolute commitment to seeing justice done, no matter the cost. Emma closed her eyes and finally, mercifully, slept. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new opportunities. But tonight, she'd earned her rest. The girl who'd hidden beneath oversized scrubs was gone. In her place stood a director, a veteran, a survivor. And she wasn't hiding anymore. 3 months later, Emma stood at the prosecution table in federal court watching Vincent Cross being led to the defendant's chair in handcuffs. The courtroom was packed, media in the back rows, hospital staff scattered throughout, federal agents lining the walls. Jack sat in the front row beside Walter, both watching with expressions Emma had come to recognize as quiet pride. Cross looked diminished in his prison jumpsuit, shoulders hunched, face haggard. The man who'd built an empire on corruption and intimidation now looked like what he actually was, a criminal facing consequences. Judge Patricia Harmon entered and everyone rose. The trial had been brutal. 6 weeks of testimony, evidence, cross-examination. Cross's attorneys had attacked Emma's credibility exactly as predicted, questioned her military service, implied she suffered from PTSD, suggested her actions during the robbery were excessive and unstable. Emma had sat through it all without flinching. She'd testified for 3 days straight, walking the jury through every detail. The security failures she'd reported, Blackwell's dismissals, the robbery, the aftermath. Her voice had stayed steady even when Cross's lead attorney tried to rattle her with questions about Yemen. Isn't it true you killed 4 men during that deployment? I neutralized 4 combatants who were actively shooting at wounded soldiers. Yes. And you don't feel remorse for those deaths? I feel remorse that they chose violence. I don't regret stopping them from killing my teammates. The attorney had backed off after that. Now, Judge Harmon was reading the verdict. The jury had deliberated for 11 hours. On the charge of conspiracy to commit armed robbery, guilty. On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of money laundering, guilty. The list went on, 15 counts total, guilty on all of them. Cross's face remained blank, but Emma saw his hands tremble. Marcus Blackwell had already been sentenced, 12 years federal prison, full restitution, permanent ban from healthcare administration. Diane Porter had taken a plea deal, 5 years probation, loss of nursing license, community service. The 2 gunmen from the robbery were serving 20-year sentences. Cross's hired muscle from the assassination attempt had flipped, giving testimony that buried their employer, and now Cross himself faced the consequences. Judge Harmon set the sentencing hearing for 2 weeks out, then dismissed the court. Emma walked into the hallway to find Agent Vasquez waiting. "Congratulations," Vasquez said. "That's 43 corrupt officials who are about to have very bad days thanks to Cross's cooperation." He get his deal? Reduced from 30 years to 22. Minimum security, protective custody. Vasquez shrugged. Could be worse. Could be better. Justice isn't always clean, Emma. Sometimes you take what you can get. Emma nodded slowly. Vasquez was right. Cross would serve time. His network was collapsing. The corruption that had poisoned Ridgeway for 15 years was finally being exposed and dismantled. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Walter rolled up in his wheelchair, grinning. Guilty on all count. That's what I call a good day's work. I didn't do it alone. No, but you started it. You're the one who refused to stay quiet when everyone told you to shut up and disappear. Walter extended his hand. The Veterans Center ceremony is tomorrow night. You're still coming, right? Emma had tried to decline the honor 3 separate times. Walter had refused to accept her refusal. I'll be there, she said. The ceremony took place in the Veterans Center's main hall, decorated with flags and military memorabilia. 50 veterans filled the room, men and women from every branch, every generation, all gathered to honor one of their own. Emma wore dress clothes borrowed from Jack's ex-wife's closet again. She still hadn't bothered replacing her wardrobe after everything that had happened. Walter stood at the podium, reading from prepared remarks. Most people see Emma Hartwell as the nurse who stopped a robbery, or the whistleblower who exposed corruption. But those of us who served recognize something else. We see someone who never stopped fighting for what's right, even when it cost her everything. He gestured Emma forward. She walked to the podium on legs that felt unsteady. Walter handed her a plaque, simple wood and brass, engraved with her name and the words "for courage, integrity, and service above self." Thank you, Emma managed. Her voice came out quieter than intended. The room erupted in applause. Emma looked out at faces she was still learning to recognize. Veterans who'd started coming to Mercy Point specifically to be treated by staff she'd hired. People who'd reached out after the trial, sharing their own stories of corruption and injustice and the importance of speaking up. I don't feel brave, Emma said when the applause died down. I feel like I did what anyone should have done, what everyone should do when they see something wrong. But most people don't, Walter said from his seat. That's what makes it matter. Emma set down the plaque and spoke without notes. For 7 years, I tried to be invisible. I thought if I could just blend in, just be normal, I could forget everything that came before. But hiding doesn't make you safe. It just makes you small. And small people can't change anything. She paused, collecting her thoughts. Someone told me recently that being broken doesn't mean being useless. It just means being human. I think that's true. We're all carrying something, trauma, loss, mistakes we can't undo. The question is what we build with those pieces. Emma met Walter's eyes. I'm building something better. Not perfect, but better. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to speak up when things go wrong, then maybe all of this was worth it. The applause came again, louder this time. Emma stepped down from the podium and was immediately surrounded by veterans wanting to shake her hand, share their stories. Thank her for reasons she didn't fully understand. Jack appeared at her elbow with coffee. You okay? Overwhelmed. Get used to it. You're kind of famous now. Emma grimaced. The media attention had been relentless. Interview requests, profile pieces, offers for book deals she had zero intention of accepting. She'd turned down everything except one sit-down interview with a local journalist who'd covered the hospital corruption story from the beginning. That interview had run the previous week. Emma had been honest about her military service, her struggles adjusting to civilian life, and her belief that institutions only changed when people demanded accountability. The response had been overwhelming. Hundreds of messages from other veterans, other healthcare workers, other people who'd tried to report problems only to be dismissed or punished. Emma had read every single one. There's someone here who wants to meet you, Jack said, gesturing toward a woman standing near the refreshment table. The woman was in her early 30s, wearing scrubs from Ridgeway General, the other major hospital in the city. She approached nervously. Director Hartwell? I'm Rebecca Morris. I'm a nurse at Ridgeway General, and She stopped, started again. I need your advice. There's something happening at my hospital, financial irregularities, safety violations being ignored. I've reported it 3 times and nothing's changed. Emma felt something shift in her chest. What kind of violations? Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed Emma photos, outdated equipment, broken sterilization systems, staffing logs that didn't match actual coverage. The evidence was damning. I don't know what to do, Rebecca said. I'm afraid if I push harder, I'll lose my job. But people are getting hurt because of these failures. Emma looked at the photos, then at Rebecca's frightened face, and saw herself 3 months ago. Scared, uncertain, convinced that speaking up would only make things worse. You already know what to do, Emma said quietly. You just need permission to do it. I could lose everything? You could, or you could save lives. Emma handed back the phone. I can't make that decision for you. Nobody can. But I can tell you that staying silent won't protect you. It'll just make you complicit in whatever happens next. Rebecca's hands shook. Did you ever regret it? Exposing what was happening at Mercy Point? Emma thought about the gunfire, the threats, the night she couldn't sleep, thought about standing in federal court being questioned by hostile attorneys, thought about her entire past being dragged into public view. Every day, Emma said honestly, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat, because the alternative was watching people suffer and doing nothing. I couldn't live with that. Rebecca nodded slowly. Will you help me? If I report this officially? I'll connect you with Agent Vasquez. She specializes in institutional corruption, and I'll testify if you need me to. Emma pulled out her business card. Director of Emergency Services, Mercy Point General. Call me tomorrow. We'll figure this out together. Rebecca took the card with trembling hands. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. Emma watched her walk away, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders again. She was still learning how to carry it without collapsing. The ceremony wound down around 10 p.m. Emma helped clean up, then accepted a ride home from Jack. You're doing it again, Jack said as they drove through empty streets. Doing what? Taking on other people's battles. Rebecca's problem isn't your responsibility. Maybe not, but I can help her anyway. Jack was quiet for a moment. You know you can't save everyone, right? I can try. That's what I'm afraid of. They reached Emma's apartment building, new security system installed, cameras actually working, checkpoint that would catch weapons before they made it past the lobby. Emma had personally overseen every upgrade. You want to come up? Emma asked. I've got terrible instant coffee and a couch that's marginally comfortable. Tempting, but I've got early shift tomorrow. Jack put the car in park. Emma, what you said tonight about being broken, you meant that, didn't you? Yeah. You're not as broken as you think, you're just still healing. Jack met her eyes. And healing isn't linear. Some days you're fine, some days you're a mess. That's normal, that's human. Don't beat yourself up for having bad days. Emma felt something loosen in her throat. Thanks, Jack. Anytime. She climbed out of the car and headed into her building, waving at the security guard, a veteran she'd hired personally, someone who understood threat assessment and actually paid attention. Her apartment was still sparse, still felt temporary. Emma had never been good at making spaces feel like home. But it was hers, safe, quiet. She made the promised terrible instant coffee and sat by the window looking out at Ridgeway's lights. Her phone buzzed. Text from Patricia Winters. Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Please bring your proposals for the Veteran Healthcare Transition Program. Emma had spent the past month developing a program to help former military medical personnel transition into civilian healthcare careers. Free training, mentorship, guaranteed interviews. She'd modeled it after programs that had helped her back when she'd first separated from service. The board had been cautiously supportive. Tomorrow she'd find out if they'd approve funding. Another text, this one from David Briggs. Preliminary hearings for the city officials start next month. You'll be called to testify again. Just a heads up. Emma had known that was coming. Cross's information had led to indictments for 17 politicians, 6 judges, and 24 contractors. The legal process would take years. She was prepared for that now. One more text from an unknown number. This is Sarah. You helped me during the robbery when I was in labor. My daughter is 3 months old now. I named her Emma. Thank you for everything. Emma stared at that message for a long time, feeling emotions she didn't have words for. She'd saved a life, created space for new life to enter the world safely. That mattered more than verdicts or honors or media attention. That was the work. Emma finished her coffee and opened her laptop, pulling up the Veteran Transition Program proposal. She worked until 2 a.m., refining details, adding budget projections, building something that would outlast her time at Mercy Point. The next morning, she presented to the board. Patricia Winters listened carefully, asked pointed questions, then called for a vote. Unanimous approval, funding secured. The program would launch in 3 months. Emma walked out of the meeting to find Dr. Vance waiting in the hallway. Got a minute? He asked. They moved to an empty conference room. Vance closed the door and stood there looking uncomfortable. I owe you an apology, he said finally. For 3 years, I treated you like you were incompetent. I dismissed your opinions, ignored your recommendations, and generally acted like an arrogant ass. You did, Emma agreed. I justified it by telling myself you were inexperienced, too young, didn't understand how things worked. Vance met her eyes. The truth is, I was threatened by you. You saw problems I ignored. You asked questions I didn't want to answer, and instead of listening, I tried to make you invisible. Emma said nothing. I'm sorry, Vance continued. Truly sorry. And I want you to know that I'm stepping down as attending physician. I've accepted a position at a clinic in Portland. I think Mercy Point needs fresh leadership, and I think you need staff who actually respect you. Emma was genuinely surprised. You don't have to leave. I do. Because every time I see you, I remember how badly I failed. As a physician, as a colleague, as a decent human being. Vance extended his hand. You're going to do incredible things here, Emma. I'm glad I got to witness the beginning of it, even if I was too stupid to recognize what I was seeing. They shook hands. Vance left. Emma stood alone in the conference room, processing. Another piece of the old Mercy Point falling away. More space for something better to grow. The weeks blurred past in controlled chaos. Emma hired 6 new nurses, all veterans, implemented new safety protocols, overhauled the security checkpoint, created a formal reporting system for staff concerns that went directly to the board, bypassing middle management entirely. The ER ran smoother than it had in years. Staff morale improved. Patient outcomes improved. The culture shifted from fear and cover-your-ass bureaucracy to something resembling actual teamwork. Emma was exhausted and fulfilled in equal measure. 2 months after the verdict, she received a letter from Cross. Prison stationery, careful handwriting. Ms. Hartwell, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that watching your testimony, seeing someone refuse to be bought or intimidated or silenced, changed something in me. I spent 15 years convincing myself that corruption was just how business worked, that everyone did it, that I was smart, not criminal. You proved me wrong, not with arguments or moral lectures, but by simply refusing to accept that wrongdoing was inevitable. You demanded better, and when nobody listened, you made them listen. I'll spend the next 2 decades in prison thinking about the damage I caused, the lives I hurt, the systems I corrupted. I can't undo any of it, but I can make sure my cooperation helps dismantle what I built. It's not redemption, but maybe it's a start. Thank you for not looking away when it would have been easier. Vincent Cross. Emma read the letter twice, then filed it away. She didn't respond. Cross didn't need her absolution, and she wasn't interested in providing it, but she hoped he meant what he'd written. Hope was sometimes all you had. On a Tuesday morning, 6 months after the robbery, Emma arrived at Mercy Point to find the ER staff gathered in the break room. They decorated with streamers and a banner that read, "Thank you, Director Hartwell." Kelly, the nurse who'd sobbed during the robbery, stepped forward with a cake. "We wanted to celebrate your 6-month anniversary as director," Kelly said, "and to thank you for actually giving a damn about this place." The staff applauded. Emma felt her throat tighten. "You didn't have to do this." "We know. We wanted to." They cut the cake and spent 20 minutes just being colleagues instead of subordinates and supervisor. Emma learned that Kelly was getting married, that one of the new veteran nurses had started teaching combat medic skills to paramedics. That Dr. Vance's replacement, a young physician from Chicago, was already implementing trauma protocols Emma had only dreamed about. Things were getting better. Not perfect. Never perfect. But better. That afternoon, Emma stood in her office looking down at the ER floor, patients coming and going, staff working together, the controlled chaos she'd learned to love. Her phone buzzed. Text from Jack. 6-letter word for courage under fire, starts with V. Emma smiled and typed back, "Virtue." Jack's response, "Close." Answer was valor, British spelling, but yours works too. Emma set down her phone and pulled out the challenge coin she still carried, 7 years old, edges worn smooth from being handled. The motto etched into the metal caught the light. Who dares wins. She dared to speak up when silence was easier, dared to fight when hiding was safer, dared to demand justice when corruption seemed inevitable, and she'd won. Not everything, not perfectly, but she'd won what mattered. Emma pocketed the coin and headed back to the ER floor. There was work to do, patients to treat, staff to support, a hospital to rebuild into something worth believing in. She'd spent years running from who she was. Now she was running toward who she could become. And for the first time in 7 years, Emma Hartwell felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The nurse nobody took seriously had become the director everyone respected. The soldier who'd tried to disappear had found a different kind of battlefield. And the girl who'd thought she was broken had discovered that broken things could still heal, still build, still matter. Emma grabbed a chart and joined her team, ready for whatever came next. Because that was the work. Showing up, speaking up, refusing to accept that wrong was inevitable. One shift at a time, one patient at a time, one life at a time. And in the end, that was enough.